Chapter 657. The assessment of an official disciple is divided into several steps, or in other words, several conditions must be met at the same time. One of the three elders said to Chenzong, "The first is age, the second is bloodline, the third is cultivation, and the fourth is strength. Only when these four conditions are met at the same time can one pass the assessment and become an official disciple." Another elder immediately took out a mirror. The mirror was bronze in color. One side of the mirror was smooth, as if it could reflect everything, but it also seemed to be hazy. On the other side, there were countless hollow patterns. It was very mysterious and contained endless mysteries. This mirror is called the Small Celestial Mirror. It's a replica of the legendary treasure, the Small Celestial Mirror. Chinshidi, don't underestimate it just because it's a replica, Yu Zhengxiao explained with a smile. That's right. Although the Small Celestial Mirror is a replica, it's still a rare treasure. As long as you drop a drop of blood on it, you'll understand its mystery, the elder who took the Small Celestial Mirror said with a smile. Chenzong nodded. He stretched out a finger and cut it, squeezing out a drop of blood that was as red as a flawless gem. It fell down like the most exquisite red jade bead. What pure blood! The three elders were amazed when they saw it. This meant that Chenzong had refined his qi and blood to an amazing level. It also meant that Chenzong's martial arts foundation was very solid. A crisp sound came from the Small Celestial Mirror. However, the drop of blood did not splatter. Instead, it spread out naturally, covering the entire mirror in an instant, and then slowly seeping into the mirror. A faint red light emerged from the inside of the Small Celestial Mirror. The hollow patterns on the back of the Small Celestial Mirror seemed to come alive. They danced like dragons and snakes, dazzling people. The three elders and Yu Zhengxiao all stared at the mirror carefully. Chenzong also stared at it. Gradually, as the blood-red light receded, words began to appear on the blurry surface of the mirror. One by one, the words attracted everyone's attention. Age, 26. Bloodline, human clan, ordinary. These simple words revealed part of Chenzong's information. Chun Shidi, you're only 26 years old. Yu Zhengxiao stared at Chenzong in surprise. You're more outstanding than I thought. Elders, Chun Shidi's strength is no less than mine, Yu Zhengxiao said to the three elders. What? The three elders trembled when they heard this, and their expressions changed drastically. Who was Yu Zhengxiao? Yu Zhengxiao. Then, the three elders thought of another point, and they were even more shocked. If he remembered correctly, Yu Zhengxiao's age should be 28 years old, and Chenzong's age should be 26 years old through the Small Celestial Mirror's appraisal. The Small Celestial Mirror had never made a mistake, which meant that Chenzong's real age was 26 years old. He was 2 years younger than Yu Zhengxiao, but his strength was no less than Yu Zhengxiao's. This might mean that he had more amazing potential than Yu Zhengxiao. Immediately, the three elders sucked in a breath of cold air. Their gazes towards Chenzong seemed to contain turbulent waves. Yu Zhengxiao, it's not that we doubt you, but this is a serious matter. Are you sure that Chenzong's strength is no less than yours? One of the three elders said with a serious face. Yes. Yu Zhengxiao seemed to have thought of something and nodded solemnly. Chenzong, look at the Small Celestial Mirror and tell me where you're from. Why did you come to the Taiyuan Heaven sect? The elder who took the Small Celestial Mirror took a deep breath and asked Chenzong solemnly. I came from Chaotian Island and joined the Taiyuan Heaven sect in order to cultivate better and pursue a stronger path. Chenzong took a deep breath and stood in front of the Small Celestial Mirror. The mirror flashed with a bloody light and reflected Chenzong's solemn figure. As Chenzong finished speaking, ripples spread out on the Small Celestial Mirror like a stone falling into water, distorting Chenzong's figure. Soon after, the ripples gradually became fine and restrained, and Chenzong's reflection appeared clearly once again. Chenzong didn't know what this meant, but Yu Zhengxiao and the three elders all breathed a sigh of relief. Drip a drop of blood on the Minor Celestial Mirror, and the Minor Celestial Mirror will identify your age and bloodline. Also, within a certain period of time, the owner of the blood will stand in front of the Minor Celestial Mirror and answer questions. If you lie, the reflection will shatter. Zong understood. His reflection appeared clearly, which meant that he didn't lie. The small celestial mirror was indeed magical. The test for the official disciples of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect was also magical. The Tai Yuan Heaven sect only accepts the human clan as disciples. It's better if you have a special bloodline of the human clan. An elder explained, asking about your origin and purpose is to prevent people with ulterior motives from sneaking in. Zong, you've passed 3 tests. There's only one left, but it's a serious matter. I've already sent a message to the Mountain Master. The Mountain Master of Blue Feather Mountain. Zong was surprised. The Mountain Master of Blue Feather Mountain was the Mountain Master. If Blue Feather Mountain was compared to a sect, then the Mountain Master of Blue Feather Mountain was the sect master. The Mountain Master has replied. He wants us to go to Blue Feather Hall. The elder who sent the message to the Mountain Master immediately said excitedly. For elders of their level, it was usually quite difficult for them to meet the Mountain Master. In the 7 mountains of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect, as long as one was a transcendent realm expert, they could become an elder. However, the extreme mortal realm elders had the lowest status, but they were also the most numerous. Even the esoteric disciples had a higher status than them. The Earth Spirit Realm elders had a much higher status and enjoyed much more power. Some of them were in charge of the external affairs, while others were in charge of the core disciples and esoteric disciples. Therefore, esoteric disciples had to be respectful in front of the Earth Spirit Realm elders. As for the profound Heaven Stage elders, there were very few of them. Each one of them was an elder with real power, such as Yu Zhengxiao's master, Elder Zhangxian. A young cultivator who came from an island in the sea was younger than Yu Zhengxiao, but his strength was not inferior to Yu Zhengxiao's. He was qualified to be summoned by the Mountain Master of Blue Feather Mountain. Of course, whether or not to summon him was entirely up to the Mountain Master. If he didn't summon him, the Mountain Master would usually send a profound Heaven Stage elder to meet him. The 3 elders, Yu Zhengxiao and Zong, quickly rushed to the Blue Feather Hall at the peak. The Blue Feather Hall was grayish-white in color. Its shape was a little strange. One side was high while the other was low, as if it was slanted. It looked like the outline of an open wing from the side, but didn't give off a strange feeling. On the contrary, it looked very harmonious and natural. The hall's doors were wide open. When Zong took his first step inside, he felt an indescribable feeling. The world spirit Qi was incomparably rich and pure and contained many mysteries. It seemed that as long as one calmed down and carefully comprehended it, one would be able to obtain obvious benefits. Several gazes fell on Zong's body, giving Zong an unparalleled pressure. Zong's footsteps paused, and his body seemed to freeze. Only after a couple of breaths' time did Zong finally take a step forward. His back foot also stepped into the hole. Immediately, the extremely frightening pressure also disappeared like smoke. Deep in the center of the Blue Feather Hall, a figure was seated on a huge feather-like chair. The figure's face was a little blurry, but the aura it gave off gave Zong a feeling that it was as heavy as a mountain, but also as light as if it could fly into the sky. It was very contradictory, but also very strange. Another figure sat on the lower left. His face was also a little blurry, but Zong could feel their gazes on him, as if they wanted to see through him. Greetings, Mountain Master. Greetings, Elder Zongming. Yu Zhengxiao and the other 3 elders bowed. Greetings, seniors. Zong had yet to officially join the Blue Feather Mountain Master, so he addressed them as seniors. Give me the small celestial mirror. The Blue Feather Mountain Master spoke. His voice sounded a little old, but also a little young. It was as if 2 people were speaking at the same time, with a mixture of accents. It sounded very strange. The small celestial mirror flew into the air and landed in the Blue Feather Mountain Master's hand. He tapped his finger lightly, and layers of ripples spread out from the surface of the mirror. The information from before was replayed. You are Zong. Let me see your strength. The Blue Feather Mountain Master put away the small celestial mirror and said, Yu Zhengxiao, use your full strength to fight him. Yes, Mountain Master. After Yu Zhengxiao bowed, he pulled out his long saber and slashed out a pale saber light. The saber light was highly condensed, as if countless saber chi and saber radiance were compressed within it. If one looked carefully, one could see that there seemed to be something flowing within the saber light. That flow made the saber light even more powerful. This was just an ordinary saber strike, but it was also a strike that Yu Zhengxiao used his full strength to execute. He drew his sword. The sword light was shocking, illuminating the surroundings. It was as if a sun and a moon were standing side by side in the sky. The sun and moon shone together, condensing into a cross-shaped sword light. It was as if the blue feather palace had been divided into 4 parts, and it slashed towards the pale saber light. The saber light shattered, and the sword light dissipated, turning into countless rays of light that dissipated in the surroundings. It was unknown when, but the dense sound of sharp saber and sword clashing could be heard. Thousands of sparks lingered in the surroundings, bursting out and splashing, illuminating the blue feather palace with starlight. It was Qinzong and Yu Zhengxiao using their full speed to close in on each other. They were using exquisite and powerful sword and saber techniques to fight. This battle was more thorough and vivid than the previous one. It also allowed Qinzong and Yu Zhengxiao to understand each other's strength. Half-step sword force allowed Qinzong's every strike to be astonishingly powerful. Each strike made Yu Zhengxiao feel as if there was an invisible giant sword slashing toward him. Qinzong was also surprised by Yu Zhengxiao's saber technique realm. He was only one step away from comprehending half-step sword force. Moreover, Yu Zhengxiao's long saber contained an extremely powerful force. It was different from pseudo-spiritual power, and it was even more powerful than pseudo-spiritual power. Chapter 658. Inside Dark Feather Hall, the 3 extreme mortal realm elders stared at the battle with wide eyes. Whether it was Yu Zhengxiao or Qinzong, the strength displayed by the two had already surpassed the limit of 9-star. This kind of combat power is at least beyond the first pole. One of the elders whispered to the other 2. It's already very close to the second pole. The other elder said with certainty, but his heart was filled with emotion. Back in the day, he could also be considered a genius, but his strength before breaking through to the transcendent realm was far inferior to these 2. Back then, the 3 of them couldn't even reach the first pole, let alone the second pole. No, they couldn't even reach the limit of 9-star. The so-called first pole referred to a level higher than the limit of 9-star, and the second pole was naturally a level higher than the first pole. Above the second pole, there was a third pole. After fighting for half a quarter of an hour, the 2 had used all kinds of fighting methods, from close combat to sword and saber attacks. Enough. The Dark Feather Mountain Lord's voice sounded again. Qinzong and Yu Zhengxiao stopped their attacks at the same time. Thousands of saber and sword shadows remained in Dark Feather Hall, dissipating after a few breaths. Good seedling. I see that your cultivation is only at the mid-9-star level, but your combat power is close to the second pole. When you reach the limit of 9-star, I'm afraid that your strength will reach the third pole. The person to the left of the Dark Feather Mountain Lord spoke, his voice filled with the vicissitudes of life. This old man is Elder Songming. Qinzong, are you willing to worship this old man as your master? If you worship this elder as your master, this elder promises that he will focus on training you. You will definitely enter the transcendent realm. Before Qinzong could answer, Elder Songming spoke again and made a heavy promise. But for Qinzong, this heavy promise wasn't very attractive because it wasn't that difficult for him to reach the transcendent realm. He only needed to comprehend the true meaning of sword force, then combine the 5 minor true meanings into the true meaning of sword. Then, he would be able to break through and step into the transcendent realm, reaching the extreme mortal realm. Elder Songming, the disciples under you are all very good. It will take a lot of effort to teach them, so there's no need to increase the pressure. The Dark Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord suddenly said, Qinzong, I wish to take you in as my disciple. Are you willing? Mountain Lord, you. Even though his face was a little blurry, everyone could imagine Elder Songming's exasperated expression. Yu Zhengxiao's face was filled with shock, and the 3 elders were dumbfounded. The Lord of Blue Feather Mountain had actually opened his mouth to take in a disciple of his own accord. Thank you for your favor, Mountain Master, but I once joined a sect on Chaotian Island. Though Qinzong was astonished, He didn't refuse or agree directly. Instead, he said this: "It doesn't matter. Chaotian Island and Blue Waves Continent are thousands of miles apart. They have nothing to do with each other." The Dark Feather Mountain Master smiled and said, "Furthermore, we warriors pursue the pinnacle of martial arts. If there is an opportunity, we must seize it. Even if you acknowledge me as your master now, in the future, if you meet someone stronger or more suitable, you can continue to acknowledge me as your master. I, Dark Feather, am not so pedantic." In the past, he had rejected ancestor Tian Hong of the Jinghong Sword Sect because he was in the Unhindered Sword Sect. Even though he was expelled by the Unhindered Sword Sect, he was forced to do so by the circumstances. It was a decision made in consideration of the lives of all the disciples in the sect. Shenzong didn't complain. On the contrary, he was grateful to Doyen Yuan Lingzi. Therefore, in his heart, Shenzong had always considered himself as a disciple of the Unhindered Sword Sect. But now that the Dark Feather Mountain Master said this, it was obvious that he didn't care about Shenzong's identity. Since that was the case, Shenzong had no reason to refuse. Without a doubt, acknowledging the Dark Feather Mountain Master as his master was definitely better than acknowledging Elder Tsang Ming as his master. Ignoring Elder Tsang Ming's gloominess, the Dark Feather Mountain Master smiled happily. "Well, Shenzong will stay. You all can leave first," the Dark Feather Mountain Master said directly. Even though he was unhappy, Elder Tsang Ming knew that he couldn't win against the Dark Feather Mountain Master. The result was already set, so he could only leave. Yu Zhengxiao and the three extreme mortal stage elders bowed and left. In the huge Dark Feather Palace, only the Dark Feather Mountain Master and Shenzong were left. The Dark Feather Mountain Master's face became clear, as if the clouds were parted to reveal the bright moon. He had a face that seemed to be around 40 years old. His appearance was ordinary, but there were obvious crow's feet at the corners of his eyes. His hair was gray, but his eyes were incomparably deep and filled with wisdom. They looked like the endless sea, but also like the vast starry sky. "Shenzong, I have accepted 3 disciples to date. My eldest disciple is called Tang Gua. He is over 100 years old, and his cultivation level is at the Earth Spirit Realm. He is also one of the Earth Realm Elders of the Dark Feather Mountain Master. However, he is not in the Dark Feather Mountain right now. He is currently in the Abyss Underground." The Dark Feather Mountain Master's deep gaze landed on Shenzong as he spoke slowly. His voice overlapped and had a unique rhythm. The second disciple is called Feng Shige. He is over 60 years old, and his cultivation level is at the extreme mortal stage. He is one of the esoteric disciples of the Dark Feather Mountain. He is also not in the mountain right now. He is working with other esoteric disciples to open up a secondary world. Secondary world? Shenzong heard a term that he did not understand. The Blue Waves world that we are in is a main world. You can imagine the Blue Waves world as a big bubble. While speaking, the Dark Feather Mountain Master waved his hand, and a big bubble appeared in front of him. Shortly after, small bubbles adhered to the big bubble. These small bubbles adhered to the main world are the secondary worlds. There are many secondary worlds, and every secondary world is either similar or different. For us, every secondary world represents a new resource land. Shenzong immediately understood. He was not too surprised because when he had obtained the first 3 transformations of the will change, he had seen the magnificent wonders of the universe. Seeing that there was no obvious change in Shenzong's expression, the Dark Feather Mountain Master was even more satisfied with the temperament of this disciple. Little did he know that Shenzong had seen even more wonderful scenes before. For example, after seeing a 10,000 zhang tall mountain, seeing a 10,000 zhang tall mountain would not be so shocking. After seeing a vast ocean, seeing a lake again would not be so surprising. Shenzong, the power you use is different from pseudo-spiritual power, but it is stronger than pseudo-spiritual power. It is similar to our Dark Feather Mountain's unique secret technique, Feather Aura Technique, but it seems to be stronger. It seems that you have encountered a good opportunity, the Dark Feather Mountain Master said. Master is wise. This disciple has indeed encountered some opportunities and was lucky enough to condense this force. This disciple has named it Nihility Sword Force. Shenzong said, "If Master needs it, this disciple will copy down the cultivation method. Ha ha, you cunning little fellow, there is no need to test me. The Dark Feather Mountain Master suddenly laughed and said, Nihility Sword Force is indeed very good. It might even be better than Feather Aura Technique. However, that is your opportunity. If you're not willing to hand it over, no one can take it away. Hearing the Dark Feather Mountain Master's words, Qinzong immediately felt more at ease. Since you have acknowledged me as your master, I have an obligation to protect you. The Dark Feather Mountain Master said again, From now on, if you have any questions about cultivation, as long as I am not in retreat, you can ask me. Yes, Master. Qinzong thanked him. I observed your battle with Yu Zhangxiao just now. In addition to that powerful Nihility Sword Force, you have also grasped Half-Step Sword Force. This level of comprehension is indeed amazing. In terms of potential, Yu Zhangxiao is not as good as you. The Dark Feather Mountain Master did not hide his admiration. But you must be clear that this is not a reason for you to be arrogant and complacent. This world is very big. Since ancient times, countless geniuses have been born. As far as Master knows, there have been heaven-defying geniuses below the transcendent realm who can fight against transcendence. Hearing this, Qinzong was shocked. Being able to fight against transcendence before reaching the transcendent realm, even if it was only against the weakest first-layer mortal realm, it was still extremely shocking. This was not the situation where he had relied on the power of the Heaven Ascension Tower. Thinking about it, his current strength was obviously stronger than a peak 9-star, but in front of an extreme mortal realm master, he was still weak and insignificant. But you don't need to belittle yourself. That kind of heaven-defying genius is too rare. Not even one will appear in 1,000 years. The Dark Feather Mountain Master said, Now, how many minor true meanings have you comprehended? Reporting to Master, disciple has comprehended the true meaning of water flow, true meaning of sword force, true meaning of sword speed, true meaning of sword edge, and true meaning of sword sharpness. Qinzong reported truthfully. 5 minor true meanings. With your age and background, being able to comprehend 5 minor true meanings is indeed amazing. The Dark Feather Mountain Master nodded. As a profound sky realm master, his vision had already surpassed many people. This matter that was enough to shock many people, in his eyes, was just a small surprise. From now on, your cultivation should focus on improving your cultivation and comprehending the minor true meanings. The Dark Feather Mountain Master pondered for a moment before saying, Your current cultivation is at the peak 9-star realm, and you can continue to improve until you reach the peak 9-star realm. This improvement will allow your strength to improve further. Reaching the 3rd extreme mortal realm is not impossible. Moreover, comprehending the minor true meanings will be of great help to your future cultivation in the transcendent realm. Moreover, the moment you break through to the transcendent realm, the more true meanings you comprehend, the more stable your foundation will be, and the more benefits you will receive. Qinzong listened attentively. This was an experience he had never understood before. It could be said that every word was a gem. As for the breakthrough from half-step sword form to sword form, it will depend on luck. The Dark Feather Mountain Master said, Sword form was the world's force, a kind of power that belonged to the transcendent realm. Under normal circumstances, only transcendence could comprehend and grasp it. It could even be said that the majority of extreme mortal realm masters would find it difficult to comprehend and grasp the world's force. In addition, my Dark Feather Mountain Master has a secret martial art. You can also cultivate it to further improve your combat strength. This booklet records all kinds of information about our Dark Feather Mountain Master and the remote Yuan Heavenly Sect. Take it back and read it carefully. After the Dark Feather Mountain Master finished speaking, he waved his hand and a booklet flew over to Qinzong. Qinzong respectfully received it with both hands. He did not immediately flip through it, but instead put it away in his bosom. Since you're my 3rd disciple, from today onwards, you are also a core disciple of Dark Feather Mountain Master. Later, someone will lead you to choose a cave dwelling and receive all the equipment of a core disciple, the Dark Feather Mountain Master said. Honored Master, disciple has something to report, Qinzong said. Speak. Before this, disciple once. Qinzong recounted the matter of Bright Light Mountain and waited for the Dark Feather Mountain Master's response. Chapter 659. Walking out of the Dark Feather Hall, Qinzong felt as if a lifetime had passed. He had spent 3,000 inferior spiritual sources to become a probationary disciple of the Mingguang Mountain through the Vientiane Tower. When the time came for the assessment, he would pass the assessment and become an official disciple. But an accident caused him to have a fight with the Mingguang Mountain and killed 5 Mingguang guards. He had formed a grudge with the Mingguang Mountain. He thought that he would be wanted by the Taiyuan Sky sect and would have to leave the Taiyuan continent as soon as possible. He did not expect such a turn of events. The third disciple of the Lord of the Dark Feather Mountain, a core disciple of the Dark Feather Mountain. For most martial artists, this identity was like reaching the sky in a single bound. I'm Deacon Li Jingming. Core disciple Qinzong, please come with me. When Qinzong was sighing with emotion, a strict voice came into his ears. He saw a man standing straight dozens of meters away. Although Qinzong was the third disciple of the Lord of the Dark Feather Mountain, he did not enjoy any privileges higher than a core disciple. Of course, his identity was different from other core disciples, but this difference did not make people afraid of him. Li Jingming was naturally the person who was arranged to be Qinzong's guide. Thank you, Deacon Li, Qinzong said politely. This is my duty, Li Jingming said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. But his words were not forceful at all, and there was gentleness under the strictness. With Qinzong's identity, he certainly would not treat him maliciously. On the contrary, he should befriend him. But because of his temperament, he could not flatter him like some people. Under the guidance of Deacon Li Jingming, Qinzong came to the core disciple management department to receive the standard equipment of a core disciple. It was a token that symbolized the identity of a core disciple. It was gray and looked like a feather. It was very light, but he did not know what material it was made of. There were 3 notches. Not only did it not destroy the integrity of the token, but it also added a mysterious feeling. 1 notch represented an official disciple, 2 notch represented an elite disciple, and 3 notch represented a core disciple. This kind of identity token was different from the identity tokens that Qinzong had seen in the past. It was more mysterious and required a drop of blood to recognize the owner. After dripping his blood, Qinzong felt a certain connection between himself and the token. This isn't just an identity token. It's also a communication token, Li Jingming said. You can use your mental power to examine the mysteries within. As promised, Qinzong mobilized his mental power and communicated with the token in his hand. He immediately saw the information inside the token. Qinzong, a core disciple of Sanyu Mountain of the Taiyuan Heaven Sect. Sect Merit, 0. Message closed. The simple message was clear at a glance. You can choose to turn the communication function on or off. Normally, after you get the identity token, it will be turned off by default. Li Jingming's voice sounded in his ears. With some curiosity, Qinzong turned on the communication function. Suddenly, a stream of information gushed out like a waterfall. Qinzong glanced at it. First, he looked at the prefixes, which started with the Taiyuan Heaven Sect. Then, he looked at the suffixes, such as Rainbow Fall Mountain, Sanyu Mountain, and so on. Then, he saw the disciple's rank, and finally, the content of the message. After the communication function is turned on, you will be able to see the public information of the entire sect and below, Li Jingming said. Qinzong nodded and continued to look at the information curiously. It was divided into several channels, such as the sect channel, the Sanyu Mountain channel, the bounty channel, and so on. The sect channel referred to the entire Taiyuan Heaven Sect. Qinzong was a core disciple, so he could see the information in the sect channel. It was the range of official disciples, elite disciples, and core disciples. The Sanyu Mountain channel referred to the disciples of Sanyu Mountain, and so on. As for the bounty channel, it was actually the elders who issued missions and rewards, or the disciples who asked for help, and so on. In addition, there were various other ways to play. All in all, it was very wonderful, and Qinzong felt that it was an eye-opener. Outside the token was a long robe called the Little Yuan robe. It was a necessary symbol for the official disciples of the Taiyuan Sky sect. The robes of the core disciples were dark blue, while the little yuan robe of the green Feather Mountain core disciples had a grayish-white feather symbol on the cuffs. The little yuan robe of core disciples is woven with the silk of a 1,000-year-old silkworm mixed with more than a dozen precious materials. It can resist ordinary water and fire, and can resist the attack of a second-grade pseudo-spirit artifact, Deacon Li Jingming introduced. Shenzong was even more surprised. The little yuan robe could resist the attack of a second-grade pseudo-spirit artifact. If it was placed in a place like Chaotian Island, it would definitely be fought over by many cultivators below the transcendent realm. But here, it was only the standard equipment for core disciples of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect. Shenzong didn't know how many core disciples there were in the Tai Yuan Heaven sect, but there were more than 20 in the entire Sanya Mountain. The core disciples of each mountain of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect were incomparable to the core disciples of the Martial Saint Palace and the 10,000 Sky sect on Chaotian Island. The first prerequisite to become a core disciple of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect was to have a 9-star strength. On Chaotian Island, a 9-star strength was equivalent to a Grandmaster. Among all the disciples of the Martial Saint Palace, there were only 1 or 2 Grandmasters. The more Shenzong interacted with them, the more he understood how powerful the Tai Yuan Heaven sect was. Any one of the 7 mountains of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect was powerful enough to crush the likes of the Martial Saint Palace and the 10,000 Sky sect. They were all high-ranked sects, but the gap between them was so huge. This is the Minor Spirit Restoring Pill, which can restore pseudo-spirit energy. This is the Minor Spirit Refining Pill, which can assist in the cultivation of pseudo-spirit energy. This is the Yellow Jade Pill, which can cure internal and external injuries. It can be taken orally or applied externally. This is the Spirit Enhancing Pill, which can restore mental energy. This is the 100 Spirit Pill, which can cure most poisons. These 5 pills are given to the core disciples of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect, and they are enough for 1 year, Li Jingming said. The next time you can get them will be a year later. Shenzong looked at them. There were 100 pills for each type, and they had different fragrances. They were quite extraordinary. You can choose your abode. Li Jingming took out a scroll and unfolded it. It was a topographic map of the mountain with many markings. The red and blue dots here represent the abodes of the core disciples. The blue dot means that the abode has an owner, and the red dot means that the abode has no owner. Basically, the cultivation environment of each abode is similar, but the location and appearance are different. Do you have any recommendations, Deacon Li? Shenzong asked. The High Cliff Pavilion is located on the Flying Feather Cliff. The scenery is unique, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth is relatively pure, Li Jingming said after a little thought. Okay, the High Cliff Pavilion it is. Shenzong made a prompt decision. The Mountain Lord wants you to go to the Dark Feather Hall to see him after you choose your abode, Li Jingming said as he handed the key to open the High Cliff Pavilion to Shenzong. Thank you, Deacon Li. I will take my leave first. Shenzong took the green and white feather-shaped key and quickly went to the Dark Feather Hall. The Dark Feather Mountain Lord asked Shenzong to come because he added a relationship with Shenzong on his identity token. Then, he transferred some sect merits to Shenzong and instructed Shenzong to go to the Martial Arts Hall to choose the secret martial arts of the Dark Feather Mountain to cultivate. After Shenzong left the Dark Feather Hall, he looked at the information in his identity token. There was an extra column, and Shenzong edited it. Master, Tai Yuan Heaven Sect Dark Feather Mountain Lord, Dong Yunkong. From now on, Shenzong could directly send a message to the Dark Feather Mountain Lord. Besides the Dark Feather Mountain Lord, no one else could see it. As for the sect merits column, it was originally 0, but now it was 100,000. Shenzong didn't know how difficult it was to obtain the sect merits, but 100,000 merits should be a lot. First, he went to the High Cliff Pavilion. The High Cliff Pavilion was located 5,500 meters above the Dark Feather Mountain. It was like a single wing of a giant bird, and it looked as if it would take off at any time. Standing at the tip of the High Cliff Pavilion, Shenzong looked ahead. It was filled with smoke like a sea of clouds. The sea of clouds was vast and magnificent, and it made Shenzong feel relaxed and happy. Looking back, about a few thousand meters away from the flying feather cliff, there was a three-story pavilion standing on a relatively high ground. It was grayish-white in color, but it was not monotonous at all. The slanted corners made the entire pavilion feel as if it was about to fly into the sky. The high cliff pavilion. Between breaths, Chinzong could feel the fresh air entering his body, as if it was cleansing his body. It was refreshing. Taking out the green and white flying feather key, Chinzong opened the protection of the high cliff pavilion and entered. The interior of the high cliff pavilion was spotless, and the decorations were simple, but not monotonous. Chinzong was very satisfied. I've had my eyes on the high cliff pavilion for a long time, but I couldn't get it. I didn't expect it to become Chun Shidi's cave residence in the end. A familiar voice came from outside the pavilion. It was Yu Zhengxiao, senior brother Yu. Chinzong responded with a smile. Come, let's exchange messages. Yu Zhengxiao took out his identity token. Chinzong also took out his own identity token. The two tokens touched each other, and he activated his spiritual power to add a trace of imprint. Then, a new name appeared in the token. Chinzong edited it. Friend, Yu Zhengxiao, core disciple of the Dark Feather Mountain of the Tai Yuan Sky sect. By the way, Chun Shidi, did the Mountain Lord transfer merits to you? Yu Zhengxiao asked. Yes. Chinzong nodded. When my master took me in as a disciple, he transferred merits to me. That's why I was able to cultivate the blue feather secret technique in the martial arts hall. Otherwise, if I relied on my own efforts, it would probably take me a few years to accumulate enough merits to exchange for the blue feather secret technique. Yu Zhengxiao laughed. This was one of the benefits of being taken in as a disciple by a high-ranking elder. Those who weren't taken in as a disciple naturally had to rely on their own efforts to earn merits in the sect. For people like Yu Zhengxiao and Chinzong, who were taken in as disciples directly, the master would definitely give them some support. Transferring some merits to one's disciple was a form of support. Unknowingly, it would also save the disciple a lot of time, allowing them to cultivate better and walk ahead of their peers. Chun Shidi hasn't gone to the martial arts hall yet, right? Yu Zhengxiao didn't ask how many merits the Blue Feather Mountain Lord transferred to Chinzong. Instead, he changed the topic. Not yet. Chinzong answered honestly. Let's go. I'll take you there. Yu Zhengxiao laughed. At first, Chinzong thought that Yu Zhengxiao was a cold and aloof person. But now, he realized that Yu Zhengxiao was the kind of person who was cold and aloof to strangers, but would be more talkative to people he knew and approved of. Chapter 660. The Lord of Blue Feather Mountain accepting Chinzong as his disciple wasn't a shameful matter, nor was it something that needed to be kept a secret. Therefore, the people of the other 6 mountains soon found out about it. Blue Feather, I heard that you accepted a new disciple. Is there something special about him? The Lord of Rainbow, Fall Mountain, sent a message. Of course my disciple is extraordinary. This was the Lord of Blue Feather Mountain's response. Blue Feather, Chinzong betrayed my MT Mingguang. He injured a group of core disciples and killed 5 of my Mingguang guards. He is a traitor and a sinner of my MT Mingguang. Yet, you accepted him as your disciple. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? The Lord of Mingguang's phantom image appeared in the Blue Feather Palace through the communication jade token. He questioned the Lord of Blue Feather Mountain with a face full of anger. Mingguang, you, and I know what happened. The Lord of Blue Feather Mountain replied bluntly with a cold smile on his face. He was a genius, but he was expelled by the people of MT Mingguang by distorting the truth. I have to say that MT Mingguang is indeed extraordinary in this aspect. The sarcastic words made the Lord of Mingguang's expression turn gloomy. The core disciples of MT Mingguang were injured and the Mingguang guards were killed. They can only blame themselves for being inferior. Yet, you still have the face to come to me. Mingguang, your skin has become even thicker. The Lord of Blue Feather Mountain mocked mercilessly. Blue Feather, are you saying that you don't intend to hand over Chinzong? Lightning seemed to be brewing under Mingguang's gloomy face. Mingguang, I, Blue Feather, will be frank with you. If there's anyone among the disciples of the same generation who can kill Chinzong, Go ahead and kill him. I won't step in. The Lord of Blue Feather Mountain's expression turned serious. His tone became cold and solemn. It was filled with astonishing power. His eyes contained astonishing energy waves as he stared at the phantom image of the Lord of Mingguang. However, if you use any improper means, don't blame me for being merciless. All right, Mountain Master Mingguang's illusory figure replied after a few breaths of silence. Then he dispersed. Although the news of Chunzong becoming a disciple wasn't sealed, the Dark Feather Mountain Lord had strictly ordered Yu Xiao and the other elders who knew about Chunzong's strength to not leak it out. Thus, the Bright Light Mountain only knew that Chunzong was very strong enough to defeat and kill the Bright Light Guard captain, but they didn't know the specifics. Moreover, Chunzong's cultivation hadn't reached the real peak yet. There was still room for improvement, and he would only become more powerful. In Mingguang Mountain's Mingguang Palace, Mountain Lord Mingguang's face was gloomy. A terrifying aura filled the surroundings, filling up the entire Mingguang Palace. It was low and oppressive, making it difficult for people to breathe. Other than Mingguang Mountain Master, there were two other elders in the Mingguang Palace. Elder Mingyi and Elder Mingxian were both experts in the profound sky realm. That Chunzong was able to kill the captain of the Mingguang Guards. His strength is at least at the first level. Elder Mingxian analyzed. Among our Bright Light Mountain's core disciples, there are two people at the first level, and one person is infinitely close to the second level. There's still half a year before the sect tournament. In this half a year, try to improve the strength of the top 3 core disciples as much as possible. I want them to cripple Chunzong during the sect tournament. Let's see how Dark Feather Mountain will treat us, Mountain Lord Mingguang said, making the final decision. Bright Light Mountain and Dark Feather Mountain had always been at odds. Everyone knew that their grudge could be traced back to the previous Mountain Lord. Chunzong injured a group of core disciples and killed 5 Bright Light Guards. This wasn't just a slap to Bright Light Mountain's face, but also a great loss. Most importantly, Chunzong was previously a probationary disciple of Bright Light Mountain. A probationary disciple of Bright Light Mountain was expelled and later became the disciple of Dark Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord. This grudge was enough to make many people talk about it enthusiastically. The more outstanding Chunzong's performance was, the greater the damage to MT Mingguang's reputation would be damaged. The other mountain chieftains would mock the people of MT Mingguang either openly or secretly. On the contrary, if Chunzong was defeated by the people of MT Mingguang, it would prove that MT Mingguang's judgment was very poor, and he would become a laughingstock. Damn it, he was actually accepted as a disciple by Dark Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord. Zhou Shaoqi's face was pale and full of anger. His chest was still faintly hurting. Although Chunzong's sword strike didn't take his life, it left him with serious injuries. Even if he took medicinal pills orally and applied them externally, it would be difficult for him to recover without a certain amount of time. What made it even harder for him to accept was Chunzong. Shouldn't he have been chased by the Bright Light Guards after being expelled? How did he become the disciple of Dark Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord? Could it be that they had the same name? However, the news that followed shattered his last shred of hope. It was that Chunzong, the Chunzong whom he had used his privilege as a core disciple to expel. A probationary disciple who had been expelled by him had been accepted as a disciple by Dark Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord. This made Zhou Shaoqi suffer a double blow, both physically and mentally, and he was burning with jealousy. The reason why he could become a core disciple so quickly was also because of a favor and a generous gift. Chunzong was nothing. After the other core disciples who had been injured by Chunzong's sword received the news, they had all kinds of reactions. In the end, they all fell silent. They vaguely felt that they had done something wrong, but it had already happened, and there was no way to go back on their words. Liao Fifan, Qin Yijue, Luo Tang, from now on, Bright Light Mountain will give you preferential treatment and focus on nurturing you in preparation for the sect competition in half a year. Your mission is to do your best to improve your strength and become stronger. At that time, in the sect competition, you will defeat the new disciple of Dark Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord, Chunzong, and abolish him on the spot. Elder Mingxian said to the 3 young men in front of him with a cold gaze and a solemn tone. Chunzong is just a small goal. What I want to compete for is the first core disciple in the sect. Liao Fifan responded with a cold and solemn expression. Master, don't worry. He's just a new disciple, but he has some strength. When the time comes, I will let him know the consequences of provoking our bright light mountain. Qin Yijue said a little carelessly, but his eyes were serious. Yes. Luo Tang nodded vigorously. They had all heard about Chunzong's matter. It didn't matter who was right or wrong. What mattered was the result. This matter concerned the prestige of Bright Light Mountain. As disciples of Bright Light Mountain, they were naturally closely related. On Flying Feather Cliff, Chunzong was sitting in a comfortable position, his eyes looking straight ahead. He seemed to be admiring the changes in the sea of clouds, but his mind was immersed in other things. He only maintained a trace of vigilance towards the outside world. Blue Feather's secret technique. As one of the top forces, Remote Yuan Heaven Sect naturally had an extraordinary inheritance. Each of the 7 mountains of Remote Yuan also had its own unique inheritance. Blue Feather Mountain's unique inheritance was called Blue Feather's secret technique. It was divided into 2 parts. The upper part belonged to the pseudo-transcendent realm, and the lower part belonged to the transcendent realm. With Chunzong's level, he could only exchange for the upper part of Blue Feather's secret technique. Of course, even if he could exchange for the lower part, he wouldn't exchange for it for the time being. It belonged to the transcendent realm. The upper part of Blue Feather's secret technique was exactly 100,000 merit points. It seemed that although Blue Feather Mountain's Mountain Lord supported Chunzong, it wasn't much. It was within a moderate range. More than that, Chunzong still needed to work hard. However, according to Yu Zhengxiao, without this support, it would take at least several years to accumulate enough merit points to exchange for the upper part of Blue Feather's secret technique. Without a doubt, 100,000 merit points was quite a lot. Chunzong wasn't a rookie. In the sect, the stronger one was, the faster one could obtain merit points. With the strength of a core disciple, it would take several years to accumulate 100,000 merit points. If it was an elite disciple, it would probably take several times longer. If it was an official disciple, it would take at least a few decades to accumulate 100,000 merit points. Now, Chunzong had exchanged for the upper part of Blue Feather's secret technique and was studying it. It had to be said that the upper part of Blue Feather's secret technique was very profound. In terms of level, it was definitely beyond the level of high-grade pseudo-lingwu. In terms of level, it could be at the level of top-grade pseudo-lingwu. This kind of inheritance wasn't found in any sect on Chaotian Island. The complete upper part of Blue Feather's secret technique consisted of 4 parts: cultivation method, technique, movement method, and secret technique. Cultivation method was the cultivation method of pseudo-spirit energy. Technique was the method of attack and defense. Movement method was the method of evasion. Secret technique was the method of increasing one's combat power in an instant. Most of the core disciples exchanged for Blue Feather's secret technique separately. This way, they wouldn't have to take out 100,000 merit points all at once. Chunzong was studying the technique of Blue Feather's secret technique. The technique was divided into 3 moves. The first move was Blue Strike. Its cultivation method was to concentrate one's strength into a single line. However, the strength of the attack was determined by the individual. It mainly depended on the individual's strength and the number of minor true meanings integrated. At most, 3 minor true meanings could be integrated. The second move was Blue Mist. It was different from Blue Strike in that the strength was dispersed like a mist. Its defensive effect was greater than its supply effect. Its strength was also closely related to the individual's strength and the number of minor true meanings integrated. At most, 3 minor true meanings could be integrated. The third move was the most mysterious. It didn't have a fixed move. It purely depended on the cultivator's mastery of Blue Strike and Blue Mist. It was derived from one's own comprehension. Its strength wasn't fixed, but at least 4 minor true meanings could be integrated. For example, the blue crane that Yu Zhengxiao used on the gale was the Blue Feather secret technique derived from his comprehension. He wasn't in a hurry to comprehend it. Instead, he studied the Blue Feather secret technique. This technique was called Void Blue Feather. Once successfully cultivated, the martial artist's body would become extremely light. Their speed would reach an astonishing level. They could even float in the air for a short period of time. They would be able to shift their body in midair. The last blue feather secret technique was called Feather Secret Technique. It was a special technique that condensed one's strength into a force that was much stronger than pseudo-spirit energy. From there, one's strength would increase significantly. When he had fought with Yu Zhengxiao, Chenzong had felt that kind of power was the astral feather condensed from the astral feather art. But what made Chenzong feel regretful was that the astral feather art was somewhat similar to the nihility sword energy. His nihility sword energy was stronger. However, perhaps he could cultivate it for a while. What a shocking secret technique! Chenzong couldn't help but exclaim. Every pseudo-Ling Wu had a fixed minor true meaning. In other words, every pseudo-Ling Wu was created based on minor true meanings. However, the blue feather secret technique's blue feather secret technique was different. Whether it was blue strike or blue mist, both could be integrated into minor true meanings. Chapter 661. Please subscribe. Please subscribe. Please subscribe. Half a year later, the sect grand competition would be held. It was a competition for all the disciples, from the official disciples to the esoteric disciples. It was a grand event held every 3 years in the Tai Yuan Sky sect. For this reason, many disciples were already preparing to improve themselves as much as possible in order to obtain a better ranking in the competition. On the flying feather cliff, Chenzong stood at the top of the cliff, facing the sea of clouds. Gazing ahead, Chenzong's eyes seemed to be filled with countless rays of light. Immediately, he unsheathed his sword. The sword light condensed into a beam, like a wisp of grayish-white smoke, as thick as a finger. It seemed to condense into a straight line, but it also seemed to spread out like a cloud of smoke. It seemed to draw a straight line in the air, but also seemed to twist and turn as it shot forward with a dreamy feeling. A slight swishing sound was heard. The sword was nowhere to be seen, but the grayish-white smoke split the area in front of it, spreading out for tens of meters, leaving behind a grayish-white hazy trail. After a few breaths, Chenzong struck again. It was the gray strike, but it seemed to be different from before. It was slower, but the power contained in it seemed to be stronger. Every few breaths, Chenzong would strike again. It was the gray strike, but the feeling of each strike was different, because Chenzong had merged the minor true meaning into it. Currently, Chenzong had grasped 5 minor true intents. After many attempts, Chenzong realized that if he merged the sword force true intent, sword edge true intent, and sword sharpness true intent into firmament strike, the power of firmament strike would be the strongest. But if he changed the sword force true intent into sword speed true intent, the speed would be the fastest. He then changed the true intent of water flow to sword speed true intent, fusing it with the sword edge true intent and sword sharpness true intent to execute firmament strike. The speed would be average, but the power would be average. When the true meaning of sword force and true meaning of sword speed were combined with the other minor true meanings, they all had their own characteristics. In other words, it was the same dark strike, but it contained different characteristics. After mastering the gray strike, Chenzong began to cultivate the gray mist. The cultivation of the gray strike was to concentrate the power into a line, but the gray mist dispersed the power. Regardless of whether it was gray strike or gray mist, the difficulty of cultivating them was very high. Ordinary core disciples would need to spend a month's time to be able to learn the basics. As for Chenzong, he also spent a total of 3 days to cultivate gray strike. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. As Chenzong continued with his cultivation, the grayish-white mist around him grew thicker. Finally, it enveloped Chenzong's entire body, covering a radius of several meters. There was no blind spot. However, dark strike and dark mist could only be considered as the foundation of the dark feather technique. What was truly powerful was the dark feather technique derived from his own comprehension. This was also the goal and direction of Chenzong's cultivation. He could integrate at least 4 minor true meanings. Every time he integrated one minor true meaning, its power would increase significantly. However, comprehending and deriving this move was extremely difficult. It was very difficult for ordinary core disciples to do so. Even if they could do so, they would need to spend a lot of time and energy. For example, a core disciple like Yu Zhengxiao had spent half a year deriving Songhe's move. Other than cultivating the gray feather secret technique, Chunzong did not neglect the advancement of his cultivation base. The heaven and earth spirit qi here was richer and purer, and with the help of the gray feather technique, the efficiency of absorbing and refining the heaven and earth spirit qi was higher, and the burden on his body was also smaller. Every day, Chunzong could feel his body improving. In just 6 days, his cultivation was close to the late stage of the 9-star level. In the next 4 days, after Chunzong refined the spirit energy, the pseudo-spirit energy in his body surged. Late stage of the 9-star level. From mid-stage to late stage of the 9-star level, his strength would increase. The Void Sword would also become stronger. With my current strength, I should be able to reach the 2nd level. Chunzong silently mused. In fact, after Chunzong had mastered the Firmament Strike and Firmament Mist, his strength had already reached the 2nd extremity. And now that his cultivation base had broken through, it meant that his strength had increased by several folds. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Chen Shidi, how's the 3rd move of the gray feather technique? Yu Zhengxiao asked. He would look for Chunzong every few days to spar with him. Therefore, he was quite familiar with Chunzong's cultivation progress. When he found out that Chunzong only took 6 days to master Gray Strike and Gray Mist, his shock was indescribable. I'm still missing an opportunity. Chunzong replied. You're really? Yu Zhengxiao didn't know how to describe Chunzong. After all, it took him half a year to master Gray Crane. His speed was at least several times slower than Chunzong's. I heard that the top 3 core disciples of MT Mingguang are trying their best to improve themselves. When the time comes, they'll fight against you in the sect competition. Yu Zhengxiao changed the topic with a smile. At this rate, not only will they fail, but they'll also be greatly affected. Speaking of this, Yu Zhengxiao couldn't help but laugh. He seemed to be imagining that scene. Senior brother Yu, what's the grudge between MT Mingguang and MT Mingguang? Chunzong couldn't help but ask. I don't know. I only know that it has something to do with the previous leader. Yu Zhengxiao shook his head and replied, only a few people in MT Mingguang know about this grudge. A few people he was referring to were the leader of MT Mingguang and the elders in the profound heaven realm. These things have nothing to do with us for now. Come. Yu Zhengxiao pulled out his long saber and slashed out. The Taiyuan Heaven Sect was one of the top forces in the Blue Waves continent. In addition to having many experts and a deep foundation, there were also some holy places for cultivation that made countless small forces jealous. The Wuzhen realm was one of the holy places for cultivation. Its function was to allow people to better feel the fluctuations of true intent and comprehend the power of true intent. The core disciples of the Taiyuan Heaven Sect also had a special privilege, which was to enter the Wuzhen realm for free. Of course, there were restrictions. Every core disciple had a chance to enter the first 3 realms of the Wuzhen realm once a year. There was no limit to the length of time they could cultivate. The Wuzhen realm wasn't located in MT Mingguang. In fact, it didn't exist in any of the 7 mountains. It was located in an independent small space. Walking through a portal in MT Mingguang, there was a deep blue light flickering all around. It seemed to be flowing endlessly. In just a breath, the deep blue light disappeared. Chunzong stood on a heptagonal platform. The platform was very large, with a radius of several thousand meters. On each side, there was a deep blue whirlpool light portal. The first realm, the second realm, the third realm. Scanning from left to right, above each whirlpool light portal, there were 3 glowing words from the first realm to the 7th realm. The first to 3rd realms were suitable for those below the transcendent realm. The 4th to 7th realms were suitable for those above the transcendent realm. It was said that the 1st realm was the least efficient, while the 7th realm was the most efficient. Official and elite disciples could also enter the Wuzhen realm to cultivate, but they would need to spend a corresponding amount of merit points from the sect. Core disciples had the privilege of cultivating once a year. More than that, they would also need to spend a corresponding amount of merit points from a sect. The first realm required the least merit points, the second realm required more, and the third realm required even more. Currently, Qinzhong's sect merit points were 0. A free opportunity was naturally very precious. Qinzhong directly headed for the third realm. Qinzhong's speed wasn't fast. He walked while thinking. He remembered asking his senior brother Yu why the first to third realms of the Wuzhen realm were suitable for those below the transcendent realm to enter, because they were filled with the aura of little true meaning. The aura of little true meaning in the first realm was the weakest, but the burden it placed on one's will was also the weakest. The third realm was the strongest. This was also the reason why the remote Yuan heavenly sect didn't set a cultivation time limit. No matter who it was, they couldn't stay in the Wuzhen realm for too long. The aura of little true meaning and the countless remnant wills would constantly impact one's cultivation. The longer one stayed, the more obvious it would be. Qinzhong walked up to the light portal of the third realm. Without any hesitation, he stepped into it. He felt as if he had stepped into water. His whole body felt sticky, as if he had sunk into deep water. In front of him, there seemed to be a white void, as if endless clouds were lingering around it. There were 7-sided platforms about 2 meters wide floating in the air. Some of the platforms had people sitting cross-legged on them, meditating with their eyes closed, while others were empty. Qinzhong discovered that the platforms weren't infinite. There were a total of 100 platforms. He chose an empty platform. His figure flashed and leaped into the air. Like a bird soaring through the air, he landed on the platform lightly and steadily. As soon as he landed on the platform, Qinzhong's expression changed. He could feel waves of chaotic information swarming towards him. There were cries of sorrow, laughter, roars, growls, and murmurs. Countless voices and information mixed together like a chaotic river. Is this the remnant wills? Qinzhong exclaimed as he silently felt the impact of the chaotic information coming from all directions. In a place like this, those who didn't have a strong enough will wouldn't be able to withstand the impact of the chaotic remnant wills. If it was light, they would faint, and if it was heavy, they would collapse. Qinzhong estimated that to withstand the impact of the chaotic remnant wills here, one would need to have at least a 7-star spiritual will. However, that was only the threshold. One would only be able to withstand the impact for a short period of time. One wouldn't be able to cultivate here. Only an 8-star spiritual would be able to withstand the impact better. However, it was also very difficult to cultivate and comprehend. Only a 9-star spiritual will could withstand the impact of the chaotic remnant wills and cultivate and comprehend. My spiritual will is several times stronger than a normal 9-star spiritual will. Withstanding the impact of the chaotic remnant wills here is a piece of cake. Qinzhong thought to himself. However, the chaotic remnant wills here are endless, and my spiritual will be constantly depleted. The longer I stay here, the weaker my resistance will be. I wonder how many days I can cultivate and comprehend here? Chapter 662. Sharp, blazing, wildly swaying, soft, vast and mighty, dark and cold, countless different auras filled the surroundings, exuding fluctuations of varying strength, like an invisible sea with endless waves and hidden undercurrents. These were the aura fluctuations of the little true meaning. They were the aura fluctuations of the little true meaning that had appeared a long, long time ago when the realm of enlightenment was first established. After that, whenever someone entered this place to comprehend the little true meaning, the aura of the little true meaning that they comprehended would also leave behind a portion of its aura. As time passed, as more and more people came here to comprehend the little true meaning, the aura of the little true meaning would also become denser and denser, and the chaotic remnant intent would also increase. Qinzhong was amazed. However, he did not indulge in it. There was a limit to how much one could withstand, and the further one progressed, the more difficult it would be to resist the chaotic remnant will. Taking advantage of the fact that he had just entered and was in his best state, Zong began to focus on comprehending minor true meanings. Amidst the many minor true intents, Zong followed the minor true intents of the 4 types of sword true intents that he had already comprehended. Slowly, the other minor true intents became fainter, and the aura of the true intent of sword force became more prominent. There were a total of over 20 sword force aura fluctuations surrounding the area. Every single one of them was slightly different, because the person comprehending it was different. The same kind of power, when used by different cultivators, would often be different, subtle, or obvious, depending on the cultivator. Earlier, Zong had comprehended the startling sword wall of the startling sword sect and felt the aura of the true intent of the sword. Now, he could directly feel the aura left behind by more than 20 other people who had comprehended the true intent of the sword. For a time, all kinds of inspirations emerged. Zong didn't know how much time had passed, but when he awoke, he discovered that he had already comprehended the true intent of the sword force. The true intent of the sword force rippled around him, and there was one more true intent of the sword force rippling around him. True meaning of sword force. I've already comprehended the 5 minor true meanings of sword force. I have a feeling that as long as I wish, I can immediately fuse these 5 minor true meanings into a complete true meaning of sword and break through to the transcendent realm. Zong thought, his eyes flashing with excitement. Transcendent realm. This was the yearning of countless cultivators, the lifelong pursuit of cultivation. Now that it was so close, even with Zong's temperament, he could not help feeling excited and even tempted. It was as if there was a voice constantly urging Zong to fuse the 5 minor true meanings into the true meaning of sword force and transcend the mortal realm. His mind was in turmoil, and his heart was beating wildly. His breathing became hurried, and his hands could not help but clench into fists. No, now, Zong. On the one hand, his cultivation was only at the late stage of the 9-star realm. Even though it was difficult for him to reach the pinnacle of the 9-star realm, it was not impossible. On the other hand, his master, the Green Feather Mountain Chieftain, had told him to try his best to comprehend as many minor true meanings as possible. Furthermore, he should not try to comprehend them carelessly. Instead, he should focus on comprehending the complete minor true meanings. When the time came, he could rely on comprehending more complete true meanings to make a breakthrough. Now that he had comprehended the true meaning of sword force and had resisted the temptation of breaking through, Zong calmed his heart and cleared his mind, continuing to perceive the minor true meaning fluctuations around him. In addition to the 5 minor true meanings of the true meaning of sword, Zong had also grasped the true meaning of water's true meaning of flowing water. What he needed to comprehend next were the other 3 minor true meanings of the true meaning of water. The true meaning of the water droplet, the true meaning of water ripples, the true meaning of water storm. The true meaning of the water droplet's aura fluctuations filled the surroundings. There were more than 30 of them, like droplets of water constantly dripping around him, allowing Zong to better perceive them. Compared to comprehending the true meaning of sword force, the true meaning of the water droplet was much more difficult to comprehend. It was not that the true meaning of the water droplet was more profound than the true meaning of sword force, but rather that Zong's foundation in the true meaning of sword force was more solid, so it was relatively easier for him to comprehend it. Time passed slowly. While comprehending, Zong's spiritual will was constantly being attacked, and his spiritual energy was also constantly being depleted. When Zong felt that his spiritual will had started to fluctuate, he woke up. At the same time, he had also begun to comprehend the true meaning of the water droplet. I'm almost at my limit. I have to leave first, Zong muttered to himself as he stood up and quickly leaped off the platform. The moment he left the platform, the countless chaotic remnant willpower attacks also disappeared, making Zong feel much more relaxed. He landed at the exit, took a step out, and left the 3rd realm. Zong, a voice filled with hatred and murderous intent blew towards him like the cold wind from the extreme north. Zong looked over and saw Zhou Shaoqi staring at him with a cold expression. Zhou Shaoqi's cold gaze seemed as though he wanted to tear Zong apart. Shenzong smiled slightly. His gaze landed on Zhou Shaoqi's chest and abdomen, and he asked in a seemingly friendly manner, "Have your injuries healed?" His words and gaze made Zhou Shaoqi's expression change drastically. He felt a faint pain in his chest and abdomen. Although his injuries were not light, they had already healed and did not leave behind any sequelae. However, this feeling was very uncomfortable. "Shenzong, you won't be proud for long." Zhou Shaoqi, who was extremely angry, was helpless. He could only force out such a sentence. "Speaking of which, I still have to thank you. If you hadn't used your core disciple privilege to expel me from MT Mingguang, I'm afraid I wouldn't have had the chance to become a core disciple of MT Mingguang, and I wouldn't have been accepted as a disciple by MT Mingguang's Mountain Lord," Shenzong said slowly with a smile on his face. His light words were like a heavy sword that ruthlessly pierced through Zhou Shaoqi's heart. His face turned from red to white, from white to green, from green to purple, and finally from purple to black. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot, as if it was covered by dark clouds. It was a live performance of the unique skill of changing one's face. "That's amazing," Shenzong exclaimed. "Is this unique skill of changing one's face a secret of MT Mingguang?" Puff! Zhou Shaoqi was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell backward. When a villain gets his way, he becomes arrogant. The person standing next to Zhou Shaoqi hurriedly supported him. He quickly took out an elixir and stuffed it into Zhou Shaoqi's mouth. Then he stared coldly at Shenzong and said sarcastically, "Remember, you won't be proud for long. The sect competition soon will be the time of your death." "I'll be waiting," Shenzong replied and strode toward the exit of the Wuzhen realm. Shenzong was not good at verbal exchanges, but it did not mean that he did not know how to do it. "Die. I'll definitely kill you. Just you wait." Zhou Shaoqi woke up with the help of the elixir. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His pale face was filled with ruthlessness. He stared at Shenzong's back as he stepped into the exit of the Wuzhen realm. He growled in a low voice. Shenzong heard him, but did not pay attention to him. After stepping out of the exit of the Wuzhen realm, Shenzong was sent to the Cangyu mountain according to the identification of the identity token. He quickly went to the towering cliff pavilion. Shenzong had consumed a lot of his spiritual energy. He rested first and used the art of spiritual enhancement to recover his spiritual energy. When his spiritual energy was fully recovered, he began to comprehend the true meaning of the water droplet again. Compared to the stability of the true meaning of the sword force, the true meaning of the water droplet was only a preliminary comprehension. It could be considered a beginner. He needed to continue comprehending it to stabilize it. 3 days later, Shenzong used his finger as a sword and pierced the void. It was like a water droplet with amazing penetrating power. It pierced through the air and left a hollow mark. At this point, Shenzong had grasped 7 minor true meanings. However, grasping multiple minor true meanings did not mean that one's strength had increased. It only meant that one's skills had increased. Unless one could fuse more minor true meanings into one strike. The increasingly powerful spiritual energy allowed Shenzong to use the power of the minor true meanings more easily. Every sword strike was like a water droplet piercing through the air. Although it was not as sharp as the true meaning of sword sharpness, it had a different penetrating power. The true meaning of the sword force was different from the other 4 minor true meanings of the sword force. It was more inclined towards the impact of one's aura. Shenzong realized that when he combined the half-step sword force and the true meaning of the sword force, both would increase each other's strength. The half-step sword force and the true meaning of the sword force had similarities and differences. Shenzong was carefully comprehending the differences between the two. He hoped to use this to break through the bottleneck of the half-step sword force and grasp the true sword force. Cultivating every day, Shenzong could feel his own improvement every day. It was a wonderful feeling, and Shenzong was completely immersed in it. However, it was very difficult to comprehend the minor true meanings. Although the cultivation environment here was better than on Chaotian Island, it was still not easy to comprehend the 8th minor true meaning. If I could enter the comprehending realm a few more times, maybe I could comprehend a few more minor true meanings, Shenzong thought to himself. Unfortunately, The core disciples only had one free chance to enter the comprehending realm, and he had already used it. He had only comprehended two minor true meanings. If he wanted to enter the comprehending realm again, he would need to spend the corresponding amount of merit points. It would cost 500 merit points to enter the comprehending realm, 1,000 merit points to enter the second realm, and 2,000 merit points to enter the comprehending realm. For Qinzong, who had 0 merit points, this was undoubtedly a huge sum of money. Earning merit points in the sect, I'll put it aside for now. I'll go cultivate in the martial arts realm first. Qinzong thought to himself and set off again. The martial arts realm and the comprehending realm were both holy cultivation grounds of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect. They were both located in independent small spaces, and the core disciples also had the privilege of entering once a year. The comprehending realm's function was to comprehend the minor true meanings and true meanings, while the martial arts realm's function was to cultivate and deduce martial arts. After Qinzong left the comprehending realm, he did not immediately enter the martial arts realm. He wanted to fully comprehend the minor true meanings before entering the martial arts realm. The martial arts realm did not have a time limit. After all, no one could stay there for a long time. There was a repulsive force in the martial arts realm, and the longer one stayed, the stronger the repulsive force would become until one could no longer resist and was forcibly expelled. The martial arts realm was divided into the minor martial arts realm and the major martial arts realm. It was suitable for the pseudo-transcendence and transcendence, and there was an independent small space within it. As if he was standing in midair, surrounded by a vast expanse of whiteness, as if countless clouds were lingering around him, Qinzong closed his eyes and pondered. 7 minor true meanings. Point star. Aurora. Qinzong planned to use the other minor true meanings to create a suitable pseudo-lingu. Not only would that increase his offensive capabilities, but it would also strengthen his foundation and accumulation. Perhaps he could also derive the third move of the dark feather technique. Chapter 663. Are you Master's new disciple? In front of Qinzong was a man in a loose moon-white robe. His long hair draped over his shoulders, covering half of his face. His skin was as white as jade and seemed to be emitting a faint halo of warmth. His gaze was as cold as a clear spring and as deep as the ocean. His voice was somewhat feminine, but it also carried a trace of magnetism. It was very charming. At first glance, Qinzong thought this man was very beautiful, but he was a man. Yes, Qinzong greets second senior brother. Qinzong saluted. This man was Feng Shigui, the second disciple of the Lord of Sanya Mountain. The fact that Master has accepted you as a disciple proves that you are indeed extraordinary. Train well. If you have any problems, you can come and find me. Feng Shigui's expression did not change, and his voice did not change either. He immediately took out his identity token and connected with Qinzong. A new column appeared in Qinzong's identity token. Senior brother, esoteric disciple of the Sangyu Mountain of the Tai Yuan Sky sect, Feng Shigui. Master said second senior brother went to open up a secondary world. Now that he had returned, it seemed that the secondary world had been opened up. Qin Shidi, I've accepted a team mission. After completing it, each person will get thousands of merit points. Do you want to come? Not long after, there was a message notification in the identity token. Qinzong looked at it and saw that it was a message from Yu Zhengxiao. What mission? Qinzong's eyes lit up when he saw the thousands of merit points. He replied with a question. Not long ago, the sect discovered a new world. Esoteric disciples were the vanguard. The rest of the work was completed by core disciples. Yu Zhengxiao replied quickly. Where do we meet? Qinzong replied immediately. First, he was tempted by the thousands of merit points. After all, whether it was entering the enlightenment realm or the martial arts realm, merit points were required. He could not ask Master for more. Second, he was curious about the secondary world. It was only right to see it. After reading Yu Zhengxiao's reply, Qinzong put away his identity token and set off immediately. Previously, the Tai Yuan Sky sect controlled 5 secondary worlds. The entrances to the 5 secondary worlds were placed in the same place. Like the enlightenment realm and the martial arts realm, They were located in independent small spaces and could only be reached through the transmission portals of the various mountains. It was free for core disciples to use the portal. This time, the world's central broadcasting platform. Junior brother you, this mission is not ordinary. Are the people you invited really strong enough? A slender young man with blade-like eyebrows asked in a deep voice. He was dressed in a dark blue robe with a symbol of a falling rainbow on his cuff. Don't worry, Senior Brother Tang, Yu Zhengxiao said with a confident smile. Senior Brother Yu has always been reliable. We should have confidence in him. One of the two women standing at the side also laughed. They had worked together more than once and understood each other relatively well. At this moment, a figure passed through the portal and stepped into the secondary world's turntable. Chen Shidi, you're here, Yu Zhengxiao said with a smile as soon as he saw him. As soon as Chen Zong stepped into the turntable, he glanced around and saw 6 rotating light portals. Above each light portal was a corresponding name, which was the name of the secondary world. Everyone, this is the new core disciple of Green Feather Mountain and the third disciple of the Mountain Master, Chen Zong. His strength is not inferior to mine. Yu Zhengxiao introduced Chen Zong to a man and 2 women. Chen Shidi, this is Senior Brother Tang Jingming, the first core disciple of Rainbow Fall Mountain. These 2 are Senior Sister Tong Xiuyin and Senior Sister Luo Qingyan, the first and second core disciples of Yaoying Mountain. Greetings, Senior Brother Tang, Senior Sister Tong, and Senior Sister Luo. Chen Zong greeted them with cupped fists. Tang Zhengming just nodded in response, as if he was not very satisfied with Chen Zong. Hello, Chen Shidi. Tong Xiuyin returned the greeting with a smile. Luo Qingyan also returned the greeting, but she did not speak. She had a cold personality. Well, since everyone is here, let's set off now and finish the mission as soon as possible, Tang Zhengming said impatiently. Let's go. The 5 of them set off and walked toward the newly opened portal of the secondary world. This secondary world was called Red Sunday. Rainbow Fall Mountain and Yaoying Mountain have a good relationship with Green Feather Mountain. Yu Zhengxiao said to Chen Zong telepathically, Tang Zhengming is not a bad person, but he is a little strange. He often doubts things that he has not seen with his own eyes. Originally, he invited another person to carry out the mission with him. That person is a good friend of Tang Zhengming, but for some reason, he could not come. So, I thought of you, Chen Shidi. I said that your strength is not inferior to mine, but Tang Zhengming did not believe me completely. That is why he is like this. Chen Zong nodded and expressed his understanding. As for Yaoying Mountain, it was said that they only accepted female disciples. The Red Sun's secondary world was discovered by the experts of the sect not long ago. The esoteric disciples were the vanguard and basically stabilized the situation there. If we let the esoteric disciples handle the rest of the follow-up work, it would be a waste of talent. Plus, the sect has the intention to cultivate the core disciples, so it appeared in the form of a mission. Yu Zhengxiao changed the topic to the mission. According to the information brought back by the esoteric disciples, the Red Sun's secondary world's temperature is very high, and its terrain is mainly desert and volcanoes. There are no humans there, but a kind of strange red fire life form. Yu Zhengxiao also explained the red fire life form to Chen Zong, so that Chen Zong could understand more about it. Tang Zhengming took the lead and stepped into the portal of the Red Sun's secondary world. Chen Zong followed behind. In front of him was endless fiery red rotating. It was as if he had fallen into a volcano, but also as if endless tongues of fire were spewing out, wanting to burn him to ashes. The scene changed. Chen Zong stepped on the ground and felt traces of heat spreading from the bottom of his feet to the top. With a glance, he saw that the ground under his feet was brown and somewhat cracked. The temperature was higher than the ground outside, as if there was a heated brick bed underneath. The sky seemed to be covered with a faint layer of red gauze, like the remaining red of the setting sun. Not only did the ground under his feet emit waves of heat, but the air was also filled with endless heat. This kind of temperature was fatal for ordinary people who did not cultivate. Even ordinary real martial realm warriors would not be able to withstand it for long. Chen Zong could also feel that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth here was scorching hot. It was a kind of spiritual chi of heaven and earth that leaned toward the fire attribute. Strictly speaking, there were differences in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. However, most of the time, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was the same. Only some special places made the spiritual chi of heaven and earth different. For example, in the Red Sun subworld, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was affected by the special environment of this subworld and turned into a kind of fire attribute spiritual chi of heaven and earth. This was a very good place for warriors who cultivated fire attribute cultivation techniques. This Red Sun subworld is different from the other subworlds. Tong Xiaoyin smiled and gently tucked her hair behind her ear, looking very charming. We have only been to 3 of the other subworlds. We are not qualified to enter the other 2. Tang Jingming said seriously. However, when I step into the transcendent realm, I will leave my footprints in the other 2 subworlds. The Red Sun subworld's temperature was very high, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth had the fire attribute. Therefore, ordinary plants could not survive here. However, there was a special kind of plant that could survive and grow very well. It was the red sunwood. The red sunwood was very valuable, especially the older it was. It was said that the red sunwood heart could be sold for a sky-high price, but it was very rare. The reason why the Tai Yuan Heaven sect was able to discover the Red Sun subworld and open it was because of the red sun wood that could provide a lot of resources, not to mention other things. Our mission is to clean up the remaining red fire life forms in N or vein. There's no time to lose. Let's set out immediately. Tang Jingming said and took the lead, quickly moving forward. When the esoteric disciple was the vanguard to open up the Red Sun subworld, he had also drawn a map of the place, so they just had to follow the map. In addition to Qinzong's team, there were other core disciples of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect who formed teams to carry out missions, but there were not many of them. Such missions had high rewards, so they were very popular. Of course, the danger was not small. The ore vein that Qinzong's team was going to was the largest red sun, or in the Red Sun subworld. There were many red fire life forms living in it, but the transcendent realm red fire life forms had already been killed, leaving only those below the transcendent realm. However, they could not let their guard down because of this. A few light red trees grew in the surroundings, and they were none other than the red sunwood. The age of the red sunwood was determined by its color. Light red was the shortest, generally less than 100 years old. The specific age of the red sunwood needed to be identified more carefully, but the value of the red sunwood less than 100 years old was almost the same, so no one would go out of their way to differentiate them. The value of the red sunwood more than 100 years old was relatively high. Every 100 years was a grade, and its color would change significantly, gradually turning from light red to red. Generally, the red sunwood was 1,000 years old. The value of the red sunwood increased greatly when it was 1,000 years old. However, it was said that the red sunwood heart could only be formed by 10,000 years old red sunwood. It was a treasure that could only be found by chance. Qinzong's team did not cut down the red sunwood less than 100 years old. Although it could be sold for some value, it was nothing to them. Only the ordinary, true martial realm cultivators would pay attention to it. Along the way, Qinzong's team saw the so-called red fire life forms for the first time. It was a red fire beast, which looked like a tiger or a leopard burning in flames. It was about 2 meters long, which was not very big. When the red fire beast saw Qinzong's team, it immediately let out a roar and spat out a blazing fireball with a horribly high temperature. Break! Tang Jingming waved his hand casually. His palm was like a blade, cutting through the air. It seemed to leave behind a rainbow, which destroyed the fireball. Countless sparks sputtered out, but under Tang Jingming's skillful control, it did not affect anyone. The remaining power of the palm blade was not used up. It turned into a bright red blade light that pierced through the air and attacked the red fire beast. The red fire beast could not dodge at all. It was directly hit and split into 2. The dead crimson fire beast dimmed, revealing its pitch-black body, which looked like a burnt dead tree. It was indeed a very strange life form. After a few more glances, the team did not stop and continued forward. They then found that the red fire life forms were divided into two types. One was in the form of a beast, and the other was in the form of a human. The human form of the red fire life forms were fewer, but they were usually more powerful. Chapter 664. The red sun or vein was rich in red sun ore, and red sun or could be refined into red sun iron, which was a top-grade material for forging weapons and armors. Red sun iron essence could also be refined from a large portion of red sun iron, which was a precious material for forging low-grade spirit weapons. If they could find red sun crystals, their value would be even more astonishing. Chunzong and the other four's mission was to clear out all the red fire life forms in the red sun mineral vein, making it easier for the rest of the team to enter and mine the red sun ore again. The mineral vein was an iron-red hill that covered an area of several dozen square kilometers, constantly emitting bursts of heat. Holes of varying sizes were scattered all over the place, and all of them led to the interior of the cave. The five of us will split up, each taking a passage and clearing it out as quickly as possible, Tang Zhengming said as he stared at the mine in front of them. Isn't it too risky? Tong Xiuyin frowned slightly. No, all the transcendents in the mine have been killed, and the rest are below the transcendents. With our strength, we can deal with them, Tang Zhengming emphasized, then looked at Chen Zong and asked, Chen Shidi, is there any problem? No problem, Chen Zong replied unhurriedly. In that case, let's move out. As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Zhengming took the lead, his body turning into a streak of light as he rushed towards a 2-meter-tall passage. There weren't many 2-meter-tall passages, and most of them were only 1 meter in height. Seeing Tang Zhengming take the lead, Yu Zhengxiao and the others didn't show any surprise. They were obviously used to it and were confident in their strength. Junior brother, be careful, Yu Zhengxiao said as he also rushed toward the passage. The five of them each rushed into a 2-meter-tall passage, and a blazing heat immediately rushed towards them. The passages in the passage weren't naturally formed, but rather excavated, and claw marks could be seen on the walls. The deeper they went, the higher the temperature. A roar sounded, and a fiery red figure pounced towards them at lightning speed. It was the red fire beast. The heavenly sun sword was unsheathed, and the red sword light seemed to cause the temperature to rise. With a slash of the sword, the scarlet fire beast was sliced into two like the sun in the sky. The red fire beasts that lived in the red sun mineral vein were much stronger than the ones outside, even stronger than those in the 9th realm of the true martial realm. But to Qinzong, they were like ants. However, when the number of ants reached a certain level, it was quite shocking. As Qinzong went deeper and deeper, he continued to kill scarlet fire beasts. Qinzong arrived at a spacious cave, and dozens of scarlet fire beasts surrounded him. Dozens of scarlet fire beasts had similar appearances. Their entire bodies were red, as if they were covered in a layer of flames. They stared at Qinzong ferociously. Their eyes were filled with killing intent and madness, as if they wanted to tear Qinzong into pieces. They were all beasts, dead beasts in their wake, their bodies and the beasts. Wherever they would be dead beast corpses. Qinzong didn't stop. He kept moving forward, encountering red fire beasts and killing them. Angry shouts sounded like a strange language, but Qinzong couldn't understand it, but he could roughly understand what it meant. It was nothing more than expressing its anger and murderous intent. This was a humanoid crimson fire life form. It was about 2 meters tall and looked like a person covered in a layer of red flames. However, it was even more powerful. The red fire beast's eyes were red, as if there were flames flowing in them. It opened its mouth and roared at Qinzong angrily. Compared to red fire beasts were more intelligent. At the same time, the crimson flame giant kicked off the ground, and with shocking power, it shot toward Qinzong like a torrent of magma. The scorching heat was so intense that it seemed as if it wanted to burn Qinzong to a crisp. The red fire beast raised the thick stick in its hand and smashed it towards Qinzong with a whistling sound. One end of the cudgel was as thick as a person's thigh. It was very rough and red all over, emitting a shocking heat. It was simply made of red sun iron. When it fell into the hands of Chi Horun, it possessed a terrifying power. This attack seemed to be able to smash a small mountain, and it had reached the level of an 8-star warrior. But it was nothing to Qinzong. With a flash of swordlight, Qinzong became one with his sword. Then, Qinzong and the flaming man passed each other. The flames in the red fire beast's eyes were extinguished, and it fell forward. A bang echoed in the tunnel. The red fire beast's body was much denser. The 2-meter-tall red fire beast weighed more than 1,000 pounds, which was very shocking. The dead red fire beast also turned into charcoal, but the stick in its hand didn't change. After all, it was made of red sun iron, so it had some value. Qinzong directly put it into his mustard seed bag. The sect didn't care about the rewards in this mission. It was up to the team or the individual to decide. As for this temporary team of 5, if they got something together, of course, it would be divided. But now, it was Qinzong who got it. Encountering an 8-star red fire beast, Qinzong didn't let down his guard at all. Maybe there would be a 9-star red fire beast. As Qinzong expected, as they went deeper, the red fire beasts and red fire beasts they encountered became stronger, and the red fire beasts they encountered became stronger as well. But the civilization of the red fire beasts seemed to be still at a relatively shallow level. The weapons they used were simply made of red sun iron, which was quite crude. After they were killed, the red sun iron naturally became Qinzong's spoils of war. Neither the red fire beasts nor the red fire beasts could resist Qinzong's sword. Qinzong also didn't need to use much strength to kill all the enemies and carry out the cleanup. In another passage, Tang Jingming held a red long saber. The saber swept across like a rainbow. Dozens of red fire beasts in front of him trembled at the same time, and the flames extinguished, revealing their char bodies. As the number 1 core disciple of Rainbow Fall Mountain, Tang Jingming's strength was not inferior to Yu Zhengxiao's. In fact, he was even stronger. On the other side, Yu Zhengxiao's long saber shook. There seemed to be a faint gray saber light cutting through the air, and 2 red fire beasts in front of him fell directly. Tong Xiaoyin and Luo Qingyan were core disciples of Yaoying Mountain. Naturally, they cultivated the secret martial arts of Yaoying Mountain. The weapons they used were long whips. With a shake of the long whips, they turned into a green dragon snake that seemed to dance in the clouds, bringing out layers of phantoms. When the phantoms disappeared, the red fire beasts and red fire beasts in the surroundings were all dead. The 5 of them set out from different passages, clearing out the enemies as they went deeper. The Red Sun Mine seemed to be dozens of miles wide, but in fact, it was only a small part of the mine that protruded above the ground. Most of it was buried underground. The 5 of them spent some time and finally cleared out the protruding parts above the ground. The strongest combat power they encountered was only at the early stage of the 9-star level, which was equivalent to the level of a core disciple of Tai Yuan Heaven Sect. However, these red fire beasts had their own advantages and disadvantages compared to martial artists. The advantage of the red fire beasts was that their bodies were very strong. The red fire beasts with early-stage 9-star combat power could easily explode with hundreds of thousands of pounds of strength. Together with their blazing power, they were very terrifying and powerful. Ordinary early-stage 9-star martial artists would not be able to face them head-on. However, the disadvantage of the red fire beasts was that their attacking methods were quite crude, and their application of their own power was also at a relatively shallow level. If they had the application of power like martial artists, then the red fire beasts with early-stage 9-star combat power could be enhanced to the middle stage of 9-star. There was no doubt that the red fire beasts were intelligent beings, but their cultivation civilization was still at a relatively shallow level compared to the human race. Otherwise, the potential of the red fire beasts would be quite amazing. After going deep into the Red Sun Mine, Qinzong met Tang Jingming in a passage. "Senior brother Tang," Qinzong spoke first. "Qin shitty." Tang Jingming looked at Qinzong's unscathed appearance and could not help but nod. He was more certain of Qinzong's strength, and his attitude was obviously better. The 2 of them did not talk much. After passing each other, they went deeper into the ground through different passages. There were many passages in the Red Sun Mine, and they were very complicated. Ordinary people did not dare to go deep, or they would get lost. However, Chunzong and the others were not afraid. Perhaps it was because they were strong and brave. As they went deeper into the ground, the red fire beasts Chunzong encountered were even stronger. They were already at the pseudo-transcendent realm, and there were even more of them. The cultivation of the red fire beasts seemed to be related to the red sun mine. In other words, they directly swallowed and absorbed the red sun mine to strengthen themselves. For them, the red sun mine was their life. If someone wanted to take their life, they would be their mortal enemy. They would not rest until they were dead. What's more, for the red fire beasts, the human race was an invader. 2 red fire beasts came from the front and back, and the weapons they used were similar. Both of them were crudely made from red sun iron. The red sun iron cudgel smashed towards Chunzong, bringing with it a strong wind. It was incomparably violent, filling the passage with an astonishing whistling sound and an extremely hot aura. The power of these 2 cudgel attacks was astonishing. If he was hit, Chunzong knew that even with his golden jade impenetrable body, he would not be able to resist. Even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. Midnight Star. This was the strength of the 2 red fire beasts. Naturally, Chunzong would not stupidly stand in place and use his body to resist the opponent's attack. The heavenly sun sword slashed, and with a powerful force and exquisite technique, he diverted the attacks of the 2 red fire beasts. They missed each other and smashed towards the other. With 2 loud bangs, the 2 Crimson Flame men were struck by their respective clubs. The sound made one's scalp go numb. It was as if an iron club had smashed into an extremely hard rock, causing countless sparks to fly. This fierce attack caused the red fire beasts to stagger and retreat, revealing a painful expression. Although the red fire beast bodies were very strong, they still had their 5 senses. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a sword light flashed again. Chunzong could clearly feel the resistance of the sword when it hit the red fire beasts, but he still slashed through. The 2 red fire beasts were dead. Looking at the 2 red sun iron cudgel, it seemed to be purer than the ones he had obtained before. It seemed that the stronger the red fire beasts were, the better the quality of the red sun iron cudgel. Chapter 665. In the deepest part of the red sun mine, there was a very wide cave. It was surrounded by dark red sun iron mine walls. They looked very hard and were constantly emitting a scorching heat. At the edge of the cave, there were many red sun iron pieces that looked like fangs. In the center of the cave, there was a huge chair made of red sun iron. At this moment, there was a figure sitting on the chair. This figure was tall and strong. He wore a simple fiery red iron helmet. His eyes were like rubies under the iron helmet, and a fiery luster flickered in the depths of his eyes. He also wore fiery red armor, which made his originally majestic body seem even more powerful. His body seemed to be covered in a layer of faint red flames that constantly burned. This tall figure wearing fiery red armor sat there, as if he was the center of the entire cave. He was as steady as an iron mountain, and his body was constantly emitting an astonishingly high temperature, which could roast an ordinary person into a dried husk. Even true martial realm martial artists who were within 10 meters of him would have their mouths and tongues dry up, and would quickly lose their water content. In a short period of time, they would become dizzy and lose the ability to move. On the left and right sides of this tall and strong red fireman, there were 2 red fire beasts. They looked like tigers and leopards, but each of them was much bigger and stronger. There were a few armor-like crystals on their bodies. It looked like they were wearing armor. The flames on their bodies were also more intense. Below him, on the left and right sides, there were 5 red firemen. Each of them was 5 meters tall and looked very powerful. The strength of a red fireman was proportional to his body size. The bigger he was, the stronger he was. At this moment, a red fireman quickly ran in from outside. He knelt down on one knee and said something. The eyes of the red fireman on the chair emitted a terrifying light. It was as if 2 streams of flames were spewing out his eyes. Shocking anger filled the air. The flames around his body instantly rose as if they were going to burn everything. Immediately, that person waved his hand and said a few words. The 10 red firemen on the left and right sides bowed and ran out of the cave. They formed groups of 2. They took their weapons and a red fire beast and quickly left. Qinzong's expression changed slightly when he slashed at the red fireman. He could clearly feel the resistance. This was a pinnacle 9-star red fireman. His body was even tougher. An ordinary sword could not kill him in one strike. It should be noted that Qinzong's current combat strength had reached the 2nd level, which was 2 levels higher than the limit of the 9-star level. With such strength, even an ordinary sword strike would be very powerful and could easily kill a limit of the 9-star level. But now, when the sword landed on the pinnacle 9-star crimson flame humanoid, it felt resistance. It couldn't kill it with a single strike like before. It was easy to imagine how strong the body of the crimson flame humanoid was. If one strike was not enough, then 2 strikes would be enough. With Qinzong's speed, 1 strike and 2 strikes would not make much of a difference. With 2 slashes, the pinnacle 9-star red fire elemental was killed. After that, the red fireman, who was at the peak of the 9-star level, attacked. The pressure that the peak 9-star red fireman brought to Qinzong was not much different from that of a peak 9-star red fireman. However, the strength of his body surprised Qinzong. His sword only left a shallow sword mark on his body. This kind of injury was nothing to the red fireman. It was certain that if an ordinary pinnacle 9-star martial artist encountered such a pinnacle 9-star red fireman, they would not be able to do anything to him. They would not be able to break through his defense. Of course, the red fireman with a low level of martial arts would not be able to do anything to him, unless the martial artist was courting death. Strong slash. With a low chant, the Heavenly Sun sword was slashed out again. Vaguely, there seemed to be a flash of extremely sharp light condensing on the tip of the sword before it slashed down. It was unstoppable and unstoppable. The pinnacle 9-star red fireman was slashed apart by the sword. The strong slash was a low-grade pseudo-lingwu that Qinzong created after entering the martial arts stage based on the true meaning of the sword. With Qinzong's mental strength, activating a lesser true meaning was no longer a burden to him. He could even activate it continuously for more than 100 times without a problem. If he grasped the rhythm well and allowed his recovery speed to keep up with his consumption speed, he could even activate it 300 or 400 times without a problem. However, if he activated 2 lesser true meanings at the same time, the consumption would increase by almost double. If he activated 3 lesser true meanings at the same time, the consumption would increase by several times. In other words, if Qinzong activated a low-grade pseudo-lingwu, the consumption of a middle-grade pseudo-lingwu would be 2, and the consumption of a high-grade pseudo-lingwu would be 4. If he activated a pseudo-lingwu with 4 lesser true meanings as the foundation, the consumption of his mental strength would be 8. When facing enemies of different levels, there would be different ways to deal with them. For example, the pinnacle 9-star red fireman would not be able to kill him in 2 or 3 strikes with normal attacks, but there was no need to use too strong a secret technique. The low-grade pseudo-lingwu was just right, and it would not consume too much of his mental strength. If he could kill his opponent with a strong slash, if he used something like the Gray Strike, it would be overkill. The Red Sun Steel Staff naturally became Qinzong's trophy. At this time, Qinzong felt 2 strong auras rapidly approaching. Not long after, there was a sound. The hot aura was like a gust of wind blowing through the tunnel in front of him. Qinzong's expression was solemn. Not long after, he saw 2 figures appear one after the other. These 2 figures were much taller than any of the Scarlet Firemen they had seen before. They were at least 5 meters tall, and the Scarlet Fire Beast, leading the way in front of them, also looked much stronger than the Scarlet Fire Beast they had seen before. As soon as it saw Qinzong, the Red Fire Beast immediately roared and pounced towards him. The 2 Red Firemen did not stop it. The Red Fire Beast's strength was at the pinnacle of 9-star. Qinzong struck with his sword. Strong slash. The Scarlet Fire Beast was split in half from the middle. The red eyes of the 2 Scarlet Fire humanoids were somewhat serious, but they had no intention of retreating. Instead, they rushed towards Qinzong at an extremely fast speed, like meteorites falling from the sky. Their strong bodies rubbed against the air at high speed, creating a large amount of flames. The temperature was shockingly high, and it immediately gave Chunzong a strong pressure. The weapons held by these two Crimson Flame men were slightly different from the previous ones. They were no longer in the shape of simple sticks. Instead, they had the outline of a large saber. They were red all over and looked purer. Clearly, they were forged with higher quality crimson sun iron. The sword carried an extremely violent power. Driven by the blazing fire, it fiercely chopped towards Chunzong as if it could split a mountain. Chunzong's pupils shrank slightly. The moves these two red firemen made were different from the ones before. There was a trace of martial arts in them, and the application of power was more reasonable. Of course, for Chunzong, this kind of martial arts application was very crude. He dodged the two terrifying swords and launched a strong slash. The two red firemen's bodies were chopped in front and behind. Ear-piercing clangs sounded and countless sparks sputtered. The two red firemen's bodies trembled slightly and suddenly turned around. The rough swords brought a strong and violent whirlwind as they strangled towards Chunzong. The first level. The fighting strength of these two red firemen had reached the astonishing level of the first level. The strength of their bodies was once again beyond Chunzong's expectation. Even the strong slash only left a shallow sword mark on their bodies and did not hinder them at all. At present, among the several inferior pseudo-ling wu that Chunzong had mastered, the strong slash was the most suitable for chopping. Star, Aurora, strong slash. The three inferior pseudo-ling wu were used alternately. The star slash could leave a deep sword mark on the red firemen's bodies, but this kind of injury seemed to have no effect on the red firemen. As for the Aurora, it was extremely fast and caused the lightest injury. With the middle-level pseudo-ling wu, I should be able to kill them, Chunzong thought to himself. Unfortunately, he had not created the middle-level pseudo-ling wu in the martial arts practice realm. It was much more difficult than the inferior pseudo-ling wu. Flowing water. With another low shout, Chunzong launched another attack. The sword light was like flowing water, like a long river rushing forward, landing on the two red flame men. Flowing water. This was the inferior pseudo-ling wu that Chunzong had created with the true meaning of flowing water. Chunzong had created two inferior pseudo-ling wu while cultivating in the martial arts practice realm. It could be said that it gained a lot. However, the flowing water was obviously unable to do anything to the two red firemen. It could only make them retreat a few steps and leave some sword marks on their bodies. If I can integrate the true meaning of sword force into the strong slash and turn it into a middle-level pseudo-ling wu, I might be able to kill them. Unfortunately, I have not comprehended it for long and have not made any progress. Chunzong thought to himself. He took 2 steps back and held the hilt of the Tianyang sword with both hands. Suddenly, he thrust his sword forward. It seemed like an upward slash, a straight stab, and finally a light slash. A grayish-white sword light, as thick as a finger cut the air in front of it like a cloud or flowing light. The first red fireman's body was also cut open. The grayish-white sword light slashed towards the second red fireman dark strike. Chunzong had integrated the true meaning of sword force, true meaning of sword speed, and true meaning of sword edge into this strike. Not only was it powerful and fast, but it was also shockingly sharp. The 2 red firemen fell to the ground one after another, turning into charred black. Chunzong could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had cultivated the gray feather secret technique. However, using dark strike consumes a lot of my mental energy, Chunzong thought to himself. With his current mental energy, he could use it about 30 times in a row. If he controlled the rhythm and used it properly, he might be able to use it about 40 times. If it were other grandmasters, their mental energy was not as strong as his, so the number of times they could use it would be much less. I have already encountered the first level red fireman. I wonder if I will encounter the second level red fireman next, Chunzong thought to himself. The first level red fireman was already so strong. If it was the second level red fireman, Chunzong was not very confident that he could defeat it. However, since he had already accepted the mission, He had to continue for the sake of the thousands of merit points. Moreover, the red sun iron that he had obtained so far could be sold to the sect for a sum of merit points. Chapter 666. Luo Qingyan stood outside the cave and carefully sensed the aura fluctuations coming from inside. Her expression was somewhat solemn. She had also encountered 2 red fire beasts with the strength of the first level. She had used all her strength to end the battle in a short time. When she came here, she had intended to break in first, but when she sensed the aura, she stopped and waited for the others to arrive. "Junior sister Luo, why don't you go in?" Tang Zhengming's voice sounded as he strode forward. "Senior brother Tang, wait a moment," Luo Qingyan said. "I suggest we wait for the other senior brothers and sisters to arrive before we go in together." "There's no need for that," Tang Zhengming insisted. "This should be the deepest part. Once we wipe out all the red fire beasts inside, we will leave and turn the mission." As he spoke, Tang Zhengming rushed inside. Luo Qingyan had no choice but to follow. She was more sensitive to auras and instinctively felt that the aura inside made her a little uneasy, so she had to wait. However, since Tang Zhengming had taken the lead, Luo Qingyan could only follow and look out for each other. After entering one after another, both of them saw the tall and mighty figure sitting on the huge chair. Luo Qingyan's pupils shrank. The moment she saw the figure, the source of the powerful aura was clear. Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan's expressions changed slightly, and their eyes turned grave. Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan couldn't understand what it meant, but they could feel the anger and murderous intent in its voice, which came crashing down like a torrential wave. Tang Zhengming's and Luo Qingyan's expressions changed slightly, and their eyes turned grave. The 2 tall red fire beasts then let out an astonishing roar. Invisible sound waves reverberated in the huge cave, and the temperature of the air seemed to be constantly increasing. As the red fire beasts kept roaring, the tall and mighty figure on the huge chair also stood up. As he moved, the air around him surged like waves, blasting away the blazing heat. Every move could cause the air to fluctuate, revealing the terrifying body of the red fire beasts. Seeing this, Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan's expressions became more and more solemn. A powerful enemy. A much more powerful enemy than the red fire beasts they had encountered before. The Crimson Flame Man finally stood up. He was 3 meters tall and wore a simple helmet and armor. He looked like a general who had won countless battles on the battlefield. Grabbing with his big hand, he pulled out a 2-meter-long giant blade from the back of the huge chair. Its appearance was closer to a broadsword, but it had not been sharpened yet, so it still looked a little crude. But such a weapon was in the hands of the terrifying Red Fireman. Neither Luo Qingyan nor Tang Zhengming dared to underestimate it. As he swung his saber, a loud breathing sound rang out. A pale red gust of wind blew out, sweeping a large amount of blazing heat towards Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan. The 2 tall red fire beasts pounced forward at the same time, one towards Tang Zhengming and the other towards Luo Qingyan. "Let's end this quickly." Tang Zhengming was aware of his opponent's strength, so he said immediately. Then, his expression turned serious. He held the long saber with both of his hands. His eyes were reflected in the saber. Waning rainbow. The long saber slashed out. A bright red rainbow light streaked across the sky, carrying the power of 3 minor true meanings. It attacked the tall red fire beast that was pouncing towards him. The red fire beast's strength had reached the 1st level and was very powerful. But to Tang Zhengming, whose strength was close to the 2nd level, it was nothing. Luo Qingyan was a little more difficult to deal with, but only by a little. Waning Rainbow was the first move of the Rainbow, Fall Mountain's inherited secret martial arts technique, similar to Gray Strike. The saber slashed across like a rainbow. The 2 red fire beasts paused and then fell from the sky. Waning Rainbow flashed, and the remaining power continued to attack the red fireman, directly slashing his body. With a puff, the remaining power of Waning Rainbow shattered, but the red fireman was not injured at all. Only a saber mark was left on his armor, but the saber mark was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan's pupils contracted. The attack of Waning Rainbow was extremely powerful. Even after killing 2 first-level red fire beasts, it still had half of its power left. Yet, it did not cause any damage to the red fireman Tang Zhengming, and Luo Qingyan both understood that this red fireman was extremely powerful. One on the left and one on the right. They joined forces to fight the enemy. This Qihua person was the Qihua commander. He was extremely powerful and different from the other Qihua people. Before Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan could get close, he had already waved his 2-meter-long giant blade and slashed out in all directions like a sweeping army. It was not a profound technique, but it was already in its embryonic form. With this saber, they believed that even a mountain would be shattered. A terrifying whistling sound surged, making Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan's scalp tingle. Luo Qingyan's figure flickered like an afterimage, avoiding the sweep of the blade. However, she had no choice but to retreat because the might of the attack was too strong. Tang Zhengming, on the other hand, used his blade to block the attack, trying to close in on his opponent. But the moment his long saber came into contact with the opponent's giant saber, Tang Zhengming's face was full of horror. An extremely powerful force mixed with a terrifying blazing fire bombarded him. That kind of power made Tang Zhengming feel that he could not resist it at all. Tang Zhengming also cultivated body refining, and he had reached the perfection realm. The strength of one arm could reach 100,000 jin. Coupled with the power condensed from the powerful pseudo-spiritual power, the power of each blow was very powerful. But he was no match for the opponent. Not only was he no match for the opponent, he was even crushed. Unable to close in, Tang Zhengming was directly swept away. He felt as if his arms were broken, and his whole body was in pain. With an angry roar, the Red Fire Commander held the giant saber with both hands and slashed at Tang Zhengming. Tang Zhengming, who was retreating, suddenly changed his expression. His whole body was hit by a powerful force, and his muscles and bones were in pain. It was difficult for him to gather his strength for a while. He could only watch the giant saber fall, and a huge fiery red saber light broke through the air. It seemed to be as heavy as a mountain and as hot as magma. I can only use that move. Tang Zhengming was angry and helpless. In this case, he could only use the secret method that he did not want to use. The side effects were too great. With a flash of the whip, Tang Zhengming was quickly pulled to the side to avoid the giant saber. However, the violent impact of the giant saber made Tang Zhengming very uncomfortable. "Senior brother Tang, don't fight him head-on," Luo Qingyan said quickly after saving Tang Zhengming in time. The power of the Red Fire Commander was too amazing. It was very disadvantageous to fight him head-on. Tang Zhengming also understood this. Although he was somewhat unwilling, he also understood that the situation was such that he could only use guerrilla tactics. The two of them sped up and cooperated with each other to attack the Red Fire Commander. However, the Red Fire Commander just stood in place and waved the giant saber in his hand. Waves of blazing wind rolled up, making it difficult for Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan to get close to him. Luo Qingyan's long whip passed through the sky and hit the Red Fire Commander hard. With a snap, the Red Fire Commander did not have any reaction. He was too weak. Luo Qingyan's strength was not as good as Yu Zhengxiao's or Tang Zhengming's. She belonged to the first level. However, she was relatively strong in the first level, but there was still a gap between her and the second level. Their cultivation had reached the limit of the 9-star level. At this point, there was no room for improvement. Therefore, if they wanted to continue to improve their strength, they could only start with a minor true meaning. In terms of the subtlety of martial arts, the Red Fire Commander was no match for Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan. Tang Zhengming's saber broke through the air and seemed to twist. He avoided the giant saber and slashed at the Red Fire Commander's neck. However, he still could not do anything to the Red Fire Commander. The only weakness of the Red Fire Commander was that the use of power was too rough. Everything else was almost to the point of desperation. Strength overcame all. The terror of the Red Fire Commander made Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan only able to protect themselves. Senior brother Tang, junior sister Luo. Yu Zhengxiao came and called out. At the same time, he slashed out. The gray saber light condensed into a line and attacked the red fire commander fiercely. Gray strike. Commander Chihua's body shook and a blade mark appeared on his armor. However, the mark was not deep and did not injure Commander Chihua. Yu Zhengxiao's expression suddenly changed. Junior brother Yu, only the best pseudo-Ling Wu can really hurt him, Tang Zhengming shouted while avoiding the giant saber slash of the red fire commander. The gray strike was an upper-grade pseudo-Ling Wu and could only slightly affect the red fire commander. Yu Zhengxiao did not believe it. He slashed out with the gray strike again, but it still did not work. What a terrifying body! Yu Zhengxiao took a cold breath. Although the power of the gray strike would be different when performed by different battle strength, his battle strength was close to the second level. Under the gray strike, even a second-level warrior would not dare to resist it. After joining the battle, the three joined forces to fight against the red fire commander, which only slightly relieved the pressure on Tang Zhengming and Luo Qingyan. With a giant saber in hand, the red fire commander did not need to use any exquisite moves. He only needed to keep waving the giant saber in his hand. Under the terrifying force, the giant saber, which weighed tens of thousands of pounds, would roll up a violent wind every time. Inside the cave, a blazing storm raged wildly with terrifying momentum. Maintaining such an attack consumed a lot of physical strength, but the red fire commander did not seem to have a limit. There was no sign of exhaustion at all. This was also the reason why the red fire commander's vitality was amazing. He had unparalleled physical strength and endurance, especially the red fire commander. Here, the environment was the best for the red fire commander, which strengthened his strength imperceptibly. As the red fire commander kept waving the giant saber, the blazing storm raging in the cave became stronger and stronger, gradually affecting the three's movements. "I'll help you." Tang Xiuyin also came. She saw the situation at a glance and immediately joined the battle. The four joined forces to resist the red fire commander's violent attack and maintain a tie. But if this continued, their strength would only continue to be consumed, while the red fire commander's consumption seemed insignificant. Avoiding the giant saber, Tang Xiuyin's long whip shook violently. Like a dragon soaring into the sky, it swooped down from the sky and hit the red fire commander with amazing force. The whip was so exquisite that the red fire commander could not dodge at all and was hit immediately. Chapter 667. Subscribe, my senior and junior brothers, Sanghe. Following Yu Zhengxiao's cold voice, countless grayish-white fog spread out. This fog was made up of pure saber qi with the power of four minor true meanings. It was Yu Zhengxiao's strongest attack. A sharp cry echoed in the cave, tearing the sky apart. A grayish-white crane rushed out of the fog, spreading its wings and opening its sharp claws, flying towards Leader Chihua. In terms of size, Sanghe was much bigger than Leader Chihua and could cover him directly. Sky Rainbow piercing sky. Tang Zhengming also performed his most powerful blade attack. The long blade disappeared, leaving only a blood-red rainbow streaking across the sky. One end of it came from Tang Zhengming, while the other landed on Commander Chihua's body. Although Tang Zhengming had acted later, he had reached Commander Chihua before Sanghe. 100 Shadow Rend. Hundreds of whip shadows came from all directions with horrifying power, attacking Leader Chihua fiercely. Every whip seemed to be able to shatter a mountain. It was Tang Xiuyin's strongest attack. Shadowless. Luo Qingyan also performed her strongest attack. Her long whip shook and disappeared, but a horrifying sound was heard. Facing the four's strongest attacks, Leader Chihua had no chance of dodging at all. He took it all. Waves of shocking explosions were heard, followed by Leader Chihua's furious roar. Sanghe shattered, turning into countless grayish-white fog and spreading out. A drop of blood-red light flashed by. When everything disappeared, Leader Chihua's body was revealed. His helmet and armor were shattered, and his entire body was covered with saber wounds and whip marks. It was a shocking sight, as if he was about to shatter. However, Leader Chihua was still alive, which shocked Tang Zhengming and the other three. The roar filled with killing intent spread out in the cave. Leader Chihua suddenly opened his arms, and the wounds on his body became even more obvious. There seemed to be strands of flame moving around. The roar got louder and louder, which made Yu Xiao and the other three frown. They attacked again. Suddenly, a faint red shield appeared around Leader Qi Hua, blocking all the attacks. Buzz! Buzz, buzz, buzz! The dense noises started from the softest to the loudest, and the cave seemed to be shaking along with it. Every single red sun, iron on the edge of the cave, started to heat up, emitting waves of red light. When the heat reached its peak, rays of light shot out from the red sun, iron, towards the huge chair. At the same time, the entire chair emitted an extremely high temperature. With a buzzing sound, a huge fireball emerged from the huge chair, like a scorching sun rising into the sky. The huge fireball streaked across the sky, leaving behind a beautiful trajectory. Then, it went straight for Commander Qi Hua from above. With a boom, it exploded. The terrifying shockwave brought with it a high temperature that could melt steel. It roared and spread out in all directions. The expressions of Yu Xiao and the others changed drastically, and they hurriedly used their movement techniques to retreat. At the same time, they used their techniques to parry the surging heat wave. They felt as if they were about to be burnt to a crisp. Retreating to the entrance of the cave, the scorching airwaves gradually disappeared. The Red Fire Commander was wrapped in a sphere of scorching red light, making him look like a giant flaming man. The fiery red light gradually shrank, revealing Commander Qi Hua's body. Immediately, Yu Xiao and the others were shocked, and even more shocked. At this time, Commander Qi Hua's appearance had changed greatly. Not only had his injuries healed, but he was also covered in a layer of armor. Compared to the simple armor before, the armor now was not only more exquisite, but also protected him from head to toe. Outside the armor, there was a layer of bright yellow flame burning. The heat it emitted made Yu Xiao and the others' hearts palpitate. He was even stronger. Commander Qi Hua was already very difficult to deal with before, but now he had become even stronger. The four of them had solemn expressions on their faces, and they felt like their hands were tied. Commander Qi Hua did not care what they were thinking. He directly waved his giant blade and slashed in the air. A huge crimson saber light broke through the air like a crescent moon. The hard ground was cut open. The saber light brought about an astonishing saber pressure, making it difficult for Yu Xiao and the others to breathe. This slash could not be said to be any profound technique, but the power contained within it was simply too tyrannical. There was simply no way to resist it. The four immediately dispersed. This was a mission, and they could not retreat no matter what. As long as they killed Commander Qi Hua, the mission would be completed and they would be able to get merit points. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time and energy. The huge blazing saber light slashed at the entrance of the cave, leaving a shocking saber mark. The four spread out and attacked Commander Qi Hua from a distance. Commander Qi Hua did not dodge at all. He allowed the powerful attacks to slash his body, but they only left marks on his armor. They could not hurt him at all. Yu Xiao used his killer move again. A gray crane with a wingspan of 10 meters flew out and bombarded Commander Qi Hua's body. Countless saber lights raged wildly. After He disappeared, Commander Qi Hua's armor was densely covered with saber marks. However, none of the saber marks could cause serious injuries to Commander Qi Hua. Moreover, they could see that the saber marks were slowly disappearing. This is troublesome. Unless we can kill him in one blow, it will be very difficult. Yu Xiao and the other three understood this point. Their expressions became more serious. This kind of enemy was the most annoying. They could not be slowly killed because they could recover by themselves. The violent Commander Qi Hua completely ignored everyone's thoughts. He slashed his huge saber again. The entire cave was filled with crimson saber lights. Yu Xiao and the other three could only use their movement techniques to dodge. Occasionally, they would counterattack, but they could not cause any harm to Commander Qi Hua. If they kept dodging, they could not guarantee that they would make a mistake. Countless saber lights swept out like a raging storm. Yu Xiao and Tang Jingming were blown to the edge of the cave and stuck to the cave wall. Luo Qingyan was also repelled, her body tumbling in the air. Tong Xiaoyin could not resist either. She tried her best to dodge and flew toward the entrance of the cave. Commander Chi was slashed out with his saber. The huge saber light slashed toward Tong Xiuyin. Tong Xiuyin's face was full of horror. She was in the air and had been repelled. It was impossible for her to dodge this saber. The power contained in this saber was even more terrifying. If she was hit, she would probably die on the spot. In the blink of an eye, a flash of sword light pierced through the sky like lightning. It shone in all directions and illuminated the cave. Then, Tong Xiuyin felt that she was being pulled. Her body flew to the side at an even faster speed. The sword light and the saber light collided. The sword light was crushed, but it also blocked the saber light for a moment. The saber light slashed at the entrance of the cave again, leaving a huge saber mark. Tong Xiuyin landed on the ground. Only then did she hear the faint sound of a sword. A figure approached Commander Chi Hua at lightning speed. The cross-shaped sword light pierced through the air and slashed at Commander Chi Hua. It's Chen Shidi. Yu Jingxiao recognized the newcomer at a glance. Chen Shidi, this Commander Chi Hua's strength is amazing. His body is tyrannical. Might Song he can't do anything to him. Yu Jingxiao quickly reminded. The newcomer was Chen Zong. After saving Tong Xiuyin, Chen Zong charged at Commander Chi Hua with his sword. He didn't have a direct understanding of Commander Chi Hua's strength. The cross-shaped sword light slashed at Commander Chi Hua's body, but it only left a shallow cross-shaped sword mark. After hearing Yu Jingxiao's words, he immediately understood that this Commander Chi Hua was much stronger than the previous ones. After receiving Chen Zong's attack, Commander Chi Hua's huge saber slashed at Chen Zong fiercely. The terrifying power made Chen Zong's expression change drastically. It was too terrifying. It was as if a volcano was bombarding him. The pressure was as if it was going to crush him. With a flash of light, he disappeared under the saber and reappeared on the other side. Flowing water sword style. Chen Zong unfolded his two swords like flowing water. Streaks of sword light turned into a long river and continuously landed on Commander Chi Hua's body. Dense and dense sounds rang out. However, Commander Chi Hua wasn't affected at all. The huge saber slashed at Chen Zong again, even more violently. Chen Zong had no choice but to perform the Void Wings movement technique. His body became extremely light, like a feather, and he quickly retreated under the violent wind. While retreating, Chen Zong attacked again. Gray Strike. The grayish-white sword light slashed at Commander Chi Hua's body, leaving a clear sword mark on his armor. Tang Jingming was surprised. The might of the gray strike that Chen Zong executed seemed to be a little stronger than Yu Jingxiao's. Both of them had integrated 3 lesser true meanings, but Chen Zong's gray strike was stronger. This could only mean that Chen Zong was stronger than Yu Jingxiao. How is this possible? Tang Jingming was extremely shocked. However, his eyes wouldn't lie to him. This wasn't a trick. Even so, he still couldn't do anything to Commander Chi Hua. Chen Zong kept dodging, combining the Void Wings movement technique and the Phantom Light 9 steps. He kept dodging Commander Chi Hua's huge saber attacks. At the same time, he covered his entire body with the Void Sword Force and activated the Golden Jade Impenetrable Body to resist the high temperature from Commander Chi Hua. Both of his swords were violently slashing at Commander Chi Hua's body. His glabella lit up, and an illusory sword shadow shot out, instantly entering Commander Chi Hua's head. This was the intense sword. However, Commander Chi Hua's body suddenly stopped, and he let out a roar. The huge saber that was about to fall also stopped in midair. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Zong attacked again, but he still couldn't do anything to Commander Chi Hua. Without a doubt, the intense sword was effective against Commander Chi Hua. However, the effect was average. The most important problem was that Chen Zong couldn't break through Commander Chi Hua's defense. Even if he used the Gray Strike, he could only cause some damage. However, Commander Chi Hua could recover quickly. He had to deal a fatal blow to Commander Chi Hua in one attack. While dodging the attacks, Yu Jingxiao and the other 3 kept attacking. The only stronger attack is the 3rd move of the Dark Wing technique. However, I haven't fully comprehended it yet, Chen Zong said to himself. In the martial arts practice realm, Chen Zong spent most of his time and energy on the derivation of the 3rd move of the Dark Wing technique, except for the creation of the heaven-slashing sword movement and the flowing water sword movement. He only had a little bit left. However, that little bit stopped Qinzong. He hadn't made a breakthrough yet. This Commander Qihua is very powerful. Maybe I can use his pressure to make a breakthrough, Qinzong said to himself. Chapter 668. After making up his mind, Qinzong's counterattack became even fiercer. He tried his best to attack Commander Qihua again and again, regardless of the consumption of his strength. Every time he attacked, it was an attempt. The other four people shared the pressure to some extent, so Qinzong had more time to think. After Qinzong's repeated efforts, the third move of the gray feather technique was only one step away. It was like a thin film. As long as he pierced through the thin film, he would succeed. However, the thin film was sometimes very strong. It was not so easy to break it. He could either grind it slowly and find an opportunity, or rely on enough external pressure. Qinzong was doing the latter. Yu Zhengxiao and the others were not ordinary people. Naturally, they could see what Qinzong was doing at this time. It seemed that he was using Commander Qihua as a training target. They were shocked and broke out in cold sweat. But now, they could only rely on Qinzong to complete the task. Therefore, they tried their best to cooperate and create opportunities for Qinzong. Everyone tried their best to barely contend with Commander Qihua. The two swords collided and resisted the attack of Commander Qihua's giant blade. The terrible power crushed Qinzong and made him fly back instantly. He felt as if his bones were broken again and again. His whole body was in pain. He directly hit the hard cave wall and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. However, Qinzong's face showed a trace of smile, because in an instant he understood. A feeling of breaking the shackles spontaneously arose. After that, Qinzong understood how to derive the third move of the gray feather technique. For senior brothers and sisters, hold him back, Qinzong shouted as he landed on the ground. The four people immediately performed their unique skills. Songhe, Sky Rainbow, 100 Shadows Crack, Shadowless. Although they did not know why Qinzong said that, they chose to believe in Qinzong. Although the four of them could not kill Commander Qihua, they were powerful enough to injure him. Most importantly, they could stall Commander Qihua so that he could not deal with Qinzong. He took a deep breath, and countless ideas appeared in his mind, colliding and creating sparks. Returning the earth-in sword to its scabbard, Qinzong held the Heavenly Sun sword with both hands. This was the only way to unleash its full power. Qinzong fully utilized the mysteries of Firmament Strike and Firmament Mist. As the Heavenly Sun sword danced around him, wisps of grayish-white sword light filled the air like mist. The true meaning of sword force. The true meaning of sword speed. The true meaning of the sword edge. The true meaning of sword sharpness. One after another, Qinzong activated the little true meanings and integrated them into the little true meanings. Not enough, still not enough. Senior apprentice Brother Yu Song, he has fused 4 types of lesser true meaning and is still unable to do anything to the opponent. Even if I fuse 4 types of lesser true meaning, my power would at most be slightly stronger than Song He's. I would still be unable to truly threaten this formidable Crimson Fireman. He had to become stronger. The 5th type of lesser true meaning. Determined, Qinzong integrated the sword force true meaning into the little true meaning. If it was before, Qinzong definitely wouldn't have dared to do this because the possibility of failure was too high. Once he failed, the consequences would be dire. But now, with a burst of inspiration, there was a relatively high possibility of success. Wong. Because of the 5 types of lesser true meanings, the Heavenly Sun sword trembled incessantly, as if it couldn't withstand such a powerful force. Qinzong's arms also trembled incessantly, as if he couldn't hold onto the Heavenly Sun sword and was about to fly out of his hands. Slash! A thunderous roar sounded, following which, Qinzong held the Heavenly Sun sword tightly with both hands and slashed forward diagonally towards Commander Crimson Fireman. The grayish-white sword light in the surroundings instantly converged into one. White as jade, and it emitted layers of light. This white jade sword light was about the thickness of a finger, but it was extremely bright and resplendent. It sliced open the sky and slashed onto Commander Crimson Fireman's body, like splitting bamboo. It was like thunder and lightning. The armor on Commander Crimson Fireman's body was cut open by the white jade sword light, as if it didn't exist. This strike displayed an unparalleled and shocking power, causing Yu Zhengxiao and the other three's eyelids to twitch violently. But it wasn't enough. This strike alone wasn't enough to kill Commander Crimson Fireman. If one strike wasn't enough, then 2 strikes would be enough. Holding the Heavenly Sun sword tightly, Chen Zong slashed again. Another white jade sword light pierced through the air, and it seemed to be even purer. Following the original wound, it slashed into Commander Crimson Fireman's body again. Then came the 3rd strike. With this strike, the body and sword became one. Chen Zong's body transformed into a white jade sword light, as if it had pierced through Commander Crimson Fireman's body. 3 strikes and 3 strikes. The speed was too fast. Especially the first strike. It had already caused serious damage to Commander Crimson Fireman. His body froze instantly. Chen Zong was also good at seizing opportunities, and his control of power was even more precise. From his chest, Commander Crimson Fireman's body was cut into 2 pieces, sliding down diagonally. He constantly let out angry roars, which were the cries of death. He continued to struggle, and the flames on his body seemed to be growing stronger, but it couldn't stop the decline. Chen Zong and the others all retreated to avoid Commander Crimson Fireman's final counterattack. After all, he was too powerful, and no one knew if he would retaliate. At the same time, subtle cracking sounds were constantly heard. Chen Zong's expression changed slightly when he saw this. He saw that the Heavenly Sun sword was covered with cracks, as if it was a ceramic that had been hit by an external force. Although it was still stuck together, it would completely shatter with just a little more force. After thinking for a while, Chen Zong knew that this was because the Heavenly Sun sword couldn't withstand the power of the previous move. Moreover, it had been used 3 times in a row, so the burden on it was even greater. Fusing 5 lesser true meanings into one sword was not a simple fusion, but a true fusion. Its power was naturally very terrifying. According to the grade, it was a peerless pseudo-lingwu. The combination of 5 lesser true intents and the Void Sword force was undoubtedly terrifying. Although the Heavenly Sun Sword was a Tier 3 pseudo-spiritual artifact, it was still unable to completely withstand it. Even when Chen Zong used it, he had a feeling that he was about to lose control. On one hand, it had just been created and wasn't perfect, so his control over it was slightly weaker. On the other hand, it was too powerful and difficult to control. Yu Zhengxiao and the others stared with wide eyes as Commander Crimson Fireman turned into charcoal. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. "Junior brother, what's the name of your move?" Yu Zhengxiao couldn't help but ask. "Song Yu." A thought flashed through Chen Zong's mind. The white jade-colored sword light seemed to have flashed again. He answered without thinking and took out an elixir to consume. After using Song Yu 3 times in a row, not only was the Heavenly Sun sword damaged, but he was also heavily injured. But no matter what, the Crimson Fire Commander was dead, and all the Crimson Fire life forms in the mine had been wiped out. This meant that the mission had been completed. Now, all that was left was to leave the Crimson Sun subworld and return to the sect. "Chen Shidi, it's all thanks to you that we were able to complete the mission this time," Tang Jingming said seriously, but he felt a little ashamed. He had underestimated Chen Zong and didn't expect Chen Zong to be the strongest among them. The mission was completed because of everyone's hard work. Chen Zong smiled. This was the truth. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to deal with the powerful Crimson Fireman. No matter what, Chen Shidi's contribution is the greatest, Tong Xiaoyin said with a smile. In the end, the giant blade of Commander Crimson Fireman went to Chen Zong. According to the previous method, it should have been divided equally among the 5 of them. But because Chen Zong had contributed the most, it went to Chen Zong. The giant blade of Commander Crimson Fireman was not ordinary. After inspection, it contained a trace of red sun iron essence, which was very valuable. "Your sword is broken," You can refine the red sun iron essence from this giant blade and reforge it, Yu Zhengxiao said with a smile. Qinzong thought about it and felt that it made sense, so he accepted it. Since the mission is completed, let's go back. The five of them quickly left after looting. The return journey was smoother, and their speed seemed to be faster. After all, they had completed the mission and were relieved. After passing through the door of the Red Sun subworld, they returned to the platform of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect. The five of them went to the Wanji Hall of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect to turn in the mission. After turning in the mission, they received a total of 30,000 sect merit points. After dividing them equally, each of them received 6,000 merit points. As for how to confirm whether the mission was completed or not, there was a special way to do so. If it was confirmed that the mission was not completed, not only would the merit points be recovered, but the punishment would also be doubled. Therefore, no one would do such a thing. If they were found out, not only would they lose a lot of merit points, but they would also be announced to the whole sect and lose face. After that, they turned in the Red Sun iron essence they obtained and exchanged it for merit points. Except for the giant blade of Commander Crimson Fireman, Qinzong turned in the rest of the Red Sun iron essence and received more than 200 merit points. Although it was a lot less than 6,000 merit points, many little drops made a mickle. Chen Shidi, I hope we can continue to cooperate in the future, Tang Jingming said with a smile. Tang Xiaoyin and Luo Qingyan also said so. After all, Qinzong had a good temper and was very strong. He was indeed a good partner. There will be opportunities, Qinzong also said with a smile. After bidding farewell, Qinzong and Yu Zhengxiao returned to Gray Feather Mountain. Once he returned to Gray Feather Mountain, Qinzong sent a message to his master, the Gray Feather Mountain Lord. He said that he had some Red Sun iron essence and planned to reforge the long sword in his hand. Soon, the Gray Feather Mountain Lord replied and asked Qinzong to find the forging master of Gray Feather Mountain. The forging master was also an Earth rank elder of Gray Feather Mountain. Because of his superb forging skills, he was one of the higher ranks among the Earth rank elders. He was almost comparable to a Heaven rank elder. However, since the Gray Feather Mountain Lord came to greet him, he naturally did not put on airs. Qinzong took out the cracked Heavenly Sun Sword, then took out the giant blade of Red Sun Iron Essence. With a thought, he took out the Earth Een Sword. Then he asked the elder to extract the Red Sun Iron Essence from the giant blade to reforge the Heavenly Sun Sword. If there was any left, he would also reforge the Earth Een Sword. If there was none, then forget it. The elder stared at the giant blade of Red Sun Iron and immediately nodded with satisfaction. Then, he asked Qinzong to perform all the sword techniques he had mastered. The quality of the Red Sun Iron is very high. There is some iron essence in it. It is not bad. It is enough to reforge these two swords. Then I will have to trouble you, Qinzong said with a bow. Chapter 669. Genius remembers love in 1 second/small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. As long as you tip 10,000 traversing coins, the 6th Tao of Samsara will update one more chapter. 20,000 taels of silver, 30,000 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 taels of silver, big sale, zero limit of loss. What are you waiting for? Quickly move your fingers and empty your account. You don't have to wait for the express delivery. Outside the towering cliff pavilion, Qinzong stood on one foot at the top of the cliff. As the wind blew, he looked like he was going to fly or fall into the vast sea of clouds. The sea of clouds was rolling like endless waves. The sunlight shone like a golden dragon. Qinzong's eyes were shining. He stared at the rolling sea of clouds in front of him. It was as if he could see the entire sea of clouds. However, if one looked closely, his eyes seemed to be blank. It was as if he wasn't really looking at the sea of clouds. All of a sudden, a sword light flashed through his mind. 1, 2, 3, 100, 1,000. The sword light came and went, splitting everything. Then, the sword light began to change. The powerful slash was like an incomparably heavy giant sword that split the mountains and sunk the earth. The sword was swung out. It was as fast as the aurora, crossing the sky in an instant. It seemed like a gentle slash, but it was extremely sharp. Nothing could resist it. It cut through everything easily, leaving a sword mark in the void. As the sword pierced out, everything in front of it became extremely fragile under the incomparably sharp sword light. Vaguely, there were ripples spreading out. Then, a straight vacuum continued to extend forward as if it extended to an endless place. In the end, countless sword light trembled. An invisible giant sword was condensed. It carried a terrifying momentum that could collapse the whole world. It was as heavy as the earth, but as light as a feather. The sword fell, and the world was turned upside down. The flashing sword lights disappeared one after another until all the sword lights in his eyes disappeared. Shenzong couldn't help but wobble and take 2 steps back. A trace of tiredness appeared on his face. I didn't expect there to be such a mystery in that sword, Shenzong muttered to himself in a low voice. When he carried out a mission in the Red Sun subworld and fought with the powerful Commander Chihua, Shenzong felt that he had opened another door. All kinds of understanding about the sword emerged one after another. Although he could divide his attention to think on the way back, it was not as good as completely calming down and comprehending without any interference. The 5 lesser true meanings of the true meaning of sword. Each one of them is compatible with the unique characteristics of the sword itself. It is an extension. Using his fingers as a sword, he slashed down from above like a heavy giant sword, like an ancient mountain that wanted to crush the sea of clouds. This move was the essence of the true meaning of sword force. Slash after slash, the 5 lesser true meanings of the true meaning of sword continued to be refined and finally merged into one sword. The jade-white sword light condensed into a beam, about the size of a pinky finger. It was incomparably resplendent and cut the sky in front of him. The sea of clouds also seemed to be split in two. A jade-white sword mark remained in the air, and it took a few breaths of time for it to fade. The power of a single sword, Song Yu, was astonishing. The popping sound was very soft, but in Shenzong's ears, it was like thunder. 2 of his fingers exploded, sputtering out a little bit of blood. Looking at his heavily injured fingers, Shenzong's expression didn't change at all. The 5 lesser true meanings of Song Yu as the foundation, supplemented by the Sword of Void, is too powerful. Even I, who has cultivated the golden jade unbreakable body to perfection, can't withstand it. Instinctively, Shenzong felt that the blue jade created from the 5 minor true intents of the true intent of sword would be even more powerful. This was because the minor true intents were all related to each other. If one of the 5 minor true intents was replaced with a minor true intent of the true intent of water, then the blue jade's power wouldn't be able to reach such a level. From a certain point of view, that Song Yu with the 5 lesser true meanings of sword was already close to a low-grade linguo. The only thing it lacked was the completeness of its power and true meaning. For a few days, Shenzong was immersed in comprehending that Song Yu. But without a sword, he couldn't fully display its power. Today, it was finally time to retrieve the sword. Early in the morning, Shenzong couldn't wait to go to Elder Huo's Molten Fire Palace. You came at the right time. Try out your new sword. Seeing Shenzong, Elder Huo waved his hand, and 2 scarlet rays of light shot through the air like meteors. Shenzong reached out with both hands, and the meteors turned into 2 long swords and fell into his hands. He didn't unsheathe the swords, but carefully sized them up. The sword in his right hand should be the reforged Heavenly Sun sword, but there was an obvious difference in appearance from the previous Heavenly Sun sword. Perhaps it was because of the fusion of the Red Sun iron essence, but the sword's body was red, as if it was on fire. It also emitted waves of heat. The sword's body was longer and wider than before, but it was also thinner. The arc of the sword's edge was more slender and smooth, and it was extremely thin. It gave off an extremely sharp feeling, as if it could cut through everything. Although it was thinner, due to the fusion of precious materials such as the Red Sun iron essence, both its hardness and toughness had increased significantly. Of course, the sword's weight had also more than doubled. But to Shenzong, whose arm strength had reached 100,000 jin, this was nothing. Looking more carefully, the scarlet red on the sword's body wasn't a single piece, but streaks. It was as if there were streaks of scarlet sword light with astonishing sharpness. The new Heavenly Sun sword gave Chunzong a wonderful feeling, but he couldn't describe it at the moment. This feeling made Chunzong temporarily forget about the Earth-Een sword in his left hand and focus on the Heavenly Sun sword, gently waving it. Slashing, piercing, and so on were performed one by one. Elder Hua stood at the side, smiling without saying a word. Elder Hua had superb forging skills, but he was best at forging swords. Elder Hua had a deep understanding of swords, which was why he let Chunzong demonstrate his swordsmanship in front of him that day, and then reforged the sword according to Chunzong's characteristics. Try the little true intent. After watching for a while, Elder Hua finally spoke. With some doubts, Chunzong tried to fuse the little true intent into the new Heavenly Sun sword. The first thing he fused was the sword force true intent. There was no obvious feeling, as if it was different from before. Then came the sword speed true intent, which was the same. Next, he fused the sword edge true intent. He didn't use much strength, just a light slash. Chunzong's expression suddenly changed. This feeling, unable to resist, Chunzong slashed again, fusing the sword edge true intent. The feeling became more and more obvious. Next, Chunzong tried the sword edge true intent and the sword force true intent, but there was no feeling of the sword edge true intent. After trying the sword edge true intent a few more times, Chunzong finally confirmed that it wasn't an illusion. This sword seemed to be naturally compatible with the sword edge true intent. Using this sword to activate the sword edge true intent, Chunzong felt that it was smoother, the consumption seemed to be lower, and the power seemed to be stronger. Chunzong couldn't help but look at Elder Hua with some doubts in his eyes. Try the other sword. Elder Hua smiled proudly. Putting down the new Heavenly Sun sword, Chunzong sized up the Earth-Een sword. After the Earth-Een sword was reforged, there were obvious changes in its appearance. The sword body was red because of the fusion of the red sun iron essence. The patterns on the sword were in the shape of flying meteors. The length of the sword didn't change, but the width and thickness of the sword shrunk a little. The biggest change was the sword edge, which was longer and sharper. Looking at this sword and combining it with the new Heavenly Sun sword, Chunzong thought of the sword edge true intent. Taking a deep breath, Chunzong thrust out his sword, infusing it with the true intent of sword sharpness. Instantly, an incomparably carefree feeling arose spontaneously, as if the sword in his hand was even more compatible with his arm. Without needing to expend much energy, he could unleash the full potential of the sword thrust. Following that, Chunzong tried out the other minor true intents, but there was no difference. That day when I asked you to practice the sword, it was to observe your style. Elder Hua smiled. So I made the decision to modify the sword. If you think it's not suitable, I can change it back. Elder Hua smiled again. Chunzong wasn't in a hurry to answer. Instead, he tried again, carefully feeling it to confirm if it was suitable for him. Elder Hua was an Earth-grade elder and one of the best. His status was high, and his strength was strong. Even if Chunzong was the disciple of the Lord of Blue Feather Mountain, he couldn't be compared to him. But to practice the sword edge true intent, if it wasn't suitable, then it wasn't suitable. Could it be that he didn't dare to deny it just because of the other party's status? No, Chunzong would never think so. Elder Hua didn't disturb him, allowing Chunzong to feel it. He understood the sword and understood it very well. After a while, Chunzong exhaled, looked at Elder Hua seriously, and bowed. Thank you, Elder Hua. I like these two swords very much. That's good. These two swords are still level 3 pseudo-spiritual weapons. But in terms of hardness and toughness, they're comparable to lower-grade spiritual weapons. It's just that they don't have the power of lower-grade spiritual weapons, but they can withstand all your strength. Elder Hua nodded and waved his hand to let Chunzong leave. Carrying the new two swords, Chunzong couldn't help but feel excited. The new two swords had changed a lot, but Chunzong felt that it could make his swordsmanship better. One sword was more suitable for the sword edge true meaning, and was also more suitable for cutting. The other sword was more suitable for the sword edge, true meaning, and was also more suitable for assassination. Qinzong was sure that the two swords would increase the sword edge, true meaning, and the sword edge, true meaning, but he wasn't sure by how much. Moreover, it wouldn't weaken the other minor true meanings. Facing the sea of clouds, Qinzong took a deep breath and then pulled out the new heavenly sun sword. His gaze was faint, like the autumn water, as it slowly slid across the sword body. Immediately, Qinzong's sword fingers gently touched the sword body and gently brushed it. Amidst the cold touch, there was a shocking heat that could instantly injure an ordinary person. Qi, accompanied by the slight sound of wind breaking, a crimson sword light cut through the sky. With a twist of Qinzong's wrist, the crimson sword light became densely packed, filling a radius of more than 10 meters in front of him, like a huge red ball of light. After familiarizing himself with it, even if he didn't integrate the sword edge true meaning, Qinzong could clearly feel the changes in the sword, and it became smoother when he used the sword edge true meaning. Sheathing the heavenly sun sword, he pulled out the earthine sword and stabbed forward, directly piercing through everything in front of him, leaving a straight crimson sword mark that seemed to extend to infinity. The sword has the sword edge, sharpness, and strength and speed. After stabbing out with the sword, it seemed to have pierced through something, and an indescribable feeling of enlightenment emerged, lingering in Qinzong's mind. It was about to come out, but it seemed to be blocked by something. This feeling was like a cat scratching at his heart, and it didn't emerge for a long time, causing Qinzong to gradually feel irritated. Taking a deep breath, he decided not to think about anything and just practice the sword. Chapter 670. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Drill Martial Arts Realm. The surroundings were completely empty and suffused with an indescribable profundity. Qinzong stood in the middle with the earth-ine sword in its scabbard and the heavenly yang sword in his right hand. The blade of the sword was slanted downwards. He closed his eyes and pondered. The mysteries that pervaded the martial arts practice realm would allow one to better concentrate, clear one's mind, and increase one's perception. Difficult problems that were difficult to comprehend in the past would also become simple. The reason why Qinzong had spent 3,000 sect merit points to comprehend this move in the martial arts demonstration realm was because he believed that this move still had a lot of potential to be unearthed. Perhaps he could slowly comprehend it, but time was limited. Since there was a cultivation holy land like the martial arts stage, and he just so happened to have merit points to use, if he didn't grasp this opportunity, it would be a regret. With a new heavenly sun sword in hand, Qinzong suddenly swung it. The true meaning of sword force. The true meaning of sword speed. The true meaning of a sword edge. The true meaning of sword sharpness. The true meaning of sword force. 5 lesser true intents instantly poured into the heavenly sun sword, but he did not use the void sword force. The jade-white sword light seemed to have split open the drill realm, leaving behind a sword mark that emitted a hazy halo. It took a while before it slowly dissipated. He struck again. The third strike. Qinzong struck again and again with his sword. Streaks of jade-white sword light covered the surroundings, as if cutting the space of the martial arts stage into pieces. He suddenly withdrew his sword, and the surrounding jade-white sword light dissipated one by one. Closing his eyes again, countless thoughts flashed through Qinzong's mind. The martial arts stage around him was also constantly changing, as if it was fluctuating with Qinzong's thoughts. The true meaning of sword is formed from 5 lesser true meanings, and each lesser true meaning represents a unique characteristic of the sword. This move of Tsang Yu's is a combination of 5 lesser true meanings, and each of them is in a state of balance. What if I focused on one of the minor true meanings and made the other 4 minor true meanings auxiliary? The sudden thought came to Qinzong like a tidal wave, and he couldn't stop it. Qinzong had first studied Tsang Yu's move over and over again. Then, under the pressure of a powerful enemy, he finally made a breakthrough and completed it. After that, he perfected it and couldn't change it easily. However, at this moment, the flash of inspiration was surging like a tsunami. The constant impact made Qinzong unable to control himself. Qinzong was driven by an impulse that came from the depths of his soul. He could not help but do it. Modified Songyu. Focusing on one of the minor true meanings and making the other four minor true meanings supplementary would undoubtedly break the balance between the minor true meanings. But Qinzong still had to do it without hesitation. This was the pursuit of his own Tao. With a resolute heart, Qinzong exhaled and opened his eyes in an instant. A sharp light flashed through his eyes like the edge of a sword, as if it could cut the space in front of him in half. He drew his sword. The heavenly sun sword slashed forward. The true meaning of the edge of the sword was twice as strong as the other minor true meanings. Before the jade-white sword light could cut through the air, it suddenly trembled and dissipated. Qinzong's arm also trembled. He was hit by a powerful backlash. His face was pale, and he felt as if his head had been cut by a sword. After a short rest, Qinzong adjusted himself and drew his sword again. In order to break the balance between the 5 minor true meanings, he had to find another balance point. Only then could he ensure that it would not collapse. He tried again and again, failed again and again, and suffered backlash again and again. However, Qinzong never had the thought of giving up. After failing more than 10 times, Qinzong's face was frighteningly pale. However, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. It was a smile full of confidence. Storing up power, swinging the sword, slashing the sword. The jade-white sword light pierced through the air. It was as if the sword had directly split the drill stage into 2. This sword light was different from the previous one. The original sword light was circular and as thick as a finger. However, this sword light seemed to have been flattened. It became thin and thin like the edge of a sword. With the true meaning of the edge of the sword as the main point and the minor true meanings of the 4 true meanings of the sword as support, the new Songyu was displayed. There was no suitable target to test it on, but Qinzong was very clear that this Songyu was stronger than the original Songyu in terms of slashing. The sword light fell like a waterfall. Its momentum was vast and mighty, and it could destroy heaven and earth. As Qinzong raised his head, he swung his sword upward. The sword light was like an aurora piercing through the sun and the moon, tearing apart the waterfall of sword light. The sound of sword and saber clashing reverberated in all directions, covering a radius of several thousand meters. The 2 figures crossed each other amidst the countless sword and saber lights. Then, they both drifted to the ground. Junior brother, you've become stronger. Yu Zhengxiao sheathed his saber. His tone was somewhat emotional. Previously, Qinzong's strength was on par with his, but now, he had surpassed him. Qinzong wasn't being modest. When he reached the late stage of the 9-star realm, his combat strength had reached the 2nd level, which surpassed Yu Zhengxiao's. Now, his cultivation had reached the peak of the 9-star realm. With the improvement of his sword technique, his combat strength had reached the 2nd level. Although he hadn't reached the 3rd level yet, his combat strength was considered strong in the 2nd level. Yu Zhengxiao's strength had not stagnated either. However, he had not truly reached the 2nd level. He was only infinitely close. In 3 months, it will be the SEC tournament. Junior brother, with your improvement, you should be able to get a good ranking in the SEC tournament. Yu Zhengxiao continued, you have a high chance of entering the top 3 and fighting for 1st place. Is it that difficult to be 1st place? Qinzong asked. With his current strength, he should be the strongest below the esoteric disciples of Blue Feather Mountain. The situation of the other mountains was not much different from Blue Feather Mountain. Then, with his strength, it should not be difficult for him to get into the top 3. However, there would probably be a lot of competition for the 1st place. However, with his progress, he should be able to reach the 3rd level by the time the SEC tournament began. Even with the strength of the 3rd level, he would not be able to get 1st place. Among the 7 primordial mountains, Jinyuan Mountain has always been the strongest. However, compared to the other 6 mountains, their strength was limited. However, this time, Jinyuan Mountain sect leader's disciple, the number 1 core disciple, Fang Xingchen, has broken through. His strength has reached the 3rd level 3 months ago. Yu Zhengxiao said with a serious expression, With Jinyuan Mountain's resources, Fang Xingchen will be even stronger after cultivating for half a year. I heard that Fang Xingchen once said that after getting first place in the sect tournament, he will embark on the path of an invincible master. Hearing this, Chenzong's expression turned serious. The third level. On Chaodian Island, there were very few masters at the peak of the 9-star level. It was rare to see one even in a few decades or even 100 years. As for surpassing the first level of the 9-star level to reach the third level, it was even more impossible. On the Blue Waves continent, the land was even more vast. The cultivation environment was better. The cultivation resources were more abundant. There were more geniuses, and the inheritances were more profound. All these factors made the cultivators here stronger. However, the third level was already the limit that a pseudo-transcendent could reach. An invincible master was the strongest person in the third level. Within the same generation, no one could defeat them. Most cultivators, after reaching the third level, would choose to embark on the path of an invincible master, challenging other experts of the third level and defeating them one by one. Fang Xingchen. Chenzong could not help but repeat this name in a low voice. Perhaps this person would be his strongest opponent in the sect tournament. Other than Fang Xingchen, Jinyuan Mountain's number 2 core disciple, Su Hongyan, also has the strength of his second level, Yu Zhengxiao said again. Chenzong was astonished. Jinyuan Mountain was indeed the strongest sect among the 7 mountains of Archean. After all, before his arrival, the number 1 core disciple of Blue Feather Mountain was Yu Zhengxiao, whose strength was not even at the second level. Based on the current situation, Yu Zhengxiao's strength could only reach the second level at most. Sparring and chatting allowed Chenzong to have a better understanding of his future opponents. Chenzong spent all his 6,000 merit points on the martial arts stage, continuously comprehending Song Yu's sword. Therefore, he was short of merit points again. Chenzong went straight to the 10,000 Administrators Hall and checked the missions. Then, he chose 3 solo missions: hunting Butcherly Qiuxing, Heart Eater Wang Yi, and dismembering Saber Yongsan. The 3 hunting missions rewarded him 1,000 merit points each. Compared to other solo missions, the reward was very high. Of course, the reason why the reward was so high was because the 3 people being hunted were all very powerful and notorious. Ordinary grandmasters were no match for them at all. In the past, there was even a grandmaster-level expert who had died in their hands. After receiving the missions, Chenzong immediately left Archean Mountain. New Martial City was one of the lowest level in the Archean continent. It was rare to see a transcendent realm master. In a restaurant, a burly man sat alone. His face was covered with a curly beard, and his complexion was bronze. He looked very boorish, and he wore a gray, sleeveless beast skin martial robe. His exposed arms were incomparably thick, and they were as thick as an ordinary person's waist. His muscles were bulging, and they were full of scars. It was a ghastly sight. The poor shoulder in front of the burly man was filled with meat, braised, roasted, smoked, and braised. There was also a large jar of wine, estimated to be about 5 kilograms. He ate the meat in big mouthfuls and drank the wine in big mouthfuls. The wine dripped down his curly beard, emitting a rich wine fragrance. This way of eating made people feel that the food was very delicious and very appetizing. However, the other people in the restaurant all turned pale and their eyes were filled with fear. They did their best to shrink their bodies, as if they were afraid of being stared at. What was it that made them so afraid? It was the evil chi emanating from the burly man who was eating and drinking. It was a huge blood-stained butcher's knife on the table that was filled with mouth-watering delicacies. It was the 2 corpses that had tried to escape but were beheaded at the entrance of the restaurant. Their blood dyed the ground red, and their eyes were still filled with fear. It was all the same. Because of the fear of being killed, no one dared to leave. The shopkeeper and the waiter had already hidden under the counter, trembling. In the entire restaurant, only the sound of the burly man chewing meat and gulping down wine could be heard. "Human butcher, I know you're here. Come out and face your death." Suddenly, a cold voice sounded from outside. The burly man was unmoved and continued to eat and drink. Since you don't want to come out, I'll reluctantly send you on your way." As the voice fell, a figure flashed and appeared in the restaurant. It was a young man with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. He wore a white robe and had a long sword at his waist. He had an extraordinary bearing as he narrowed his eyes and stared at the back of the burly man. Immediately, his right hand flicked, and a long sword inlaid with gems was unsheathed. It pierced through the air like a meteor. Chapter 671. Genius Remembers Love in 1 second/small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Dominator of the Six Realms is relieved that none of my brothers are single. The meteor was bright and emitted a dazzling yellow light, instantly illuminating the restaurant. No one dared to look at it directly. With amazing sharpness, it mercilessly stabbed at the strong man's back, where his heart was. Under the sword light, the air was like water, ripples surging. Strands of bright yellow sword chi followed from the left and right, drawing beautiful arcs. Together with the sword, it pierced out as if it wanted to tear the big man apart. Everyone in the restaurant narrowed their eyes and stared at the strong man. They hoped that the sword could pierce through the strong man and kill him on the spot. Suddenly, a scarlet dazzling blade light flashed. No one knew when, but the huge blood-stained butcher's knife on the table disappeared. The scarlet blade light, wrapped in monstrous killing intent, slashed down from the sky, making people feel that the entire restaurant was split in half. The sword lights were instantly shattered, and the scarlet sword lights bombarded the white-robed young man. The white-robed young man's originally confident face was suddenly filled with horror. He quickly waved his long sword and set up sword lights to defend himself, and he quickly retreated. But the speed of his retreat was not as fast as the scarlet blade light. The sword light shattered and dissipated, and the scarlet blade light slashed at the long sword. The terrifying power was like a mountain of knives crashing into the sword. It caused the sword to bend, and the web between the thumb and the index finger to crack. The 5 fingers could not withstand the force and flew to the other side like a bird that had escaped from its cage. The incomparably sharp sword pierced into the wall of the restaurant. Only the body of the sword continued to shake and emit a buzzing sound. Subsequently, a hair-raising cracking sound resounded. The white-robed young man's robe was torn apart, and the third-level pseudo-spiritual armor he wore underneath was directly cut apart. His entire body flew out like a rag sack and crashed into the wall of the restaurant. He fell on the wide street and rolled several times before coming to a stop. The white-robed young man ignored the blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was as pale as a ghost, and his eyes were full of fear. He directly used his body movement, turning into a stream of light and flying away. At this time, it was more important to escape. Only by surviving would there be hope. However, a scarlet saber light pierced through the air from the restaurant. It was like a beautiful rainbow that traversed the sky, and also like a red lightning bolt that tore through the void. It struck the back of the white-robed young man and came out of his chest. Lowering his head to look at his chest, which was dripping with blood, a self-mocking and regretful expression appeared on the white-robed young man's pale face. Soon after, his eyes lost all signs of life. His entire body fell forward, and the blood that flowed out dyed his body red. The smell of blood drifted in the air and spread out. On the wide street, there was a ghastly saber mark that stretched for tens of meters. Inside the dilapidated restaurant, the big man was still eating and drinking. The huge butcher's knife was still in the same place, as if it had never been touched. The others were shivering in fear and kept quiet out of fear. Butcher Li Qiuxing. He would kill without a word, never asking for a reason. He would kill whenever he felt like it. He was an extremely cruel person. In his early years, Li Qiuxing was actually a butcher. After many years of slaughtering, he had mastered exquisite saber skills. Coupled with his naturally strong body and vigorous blood qi, his cultivation talent was not bad. However, he was limited by inheritance and resources, so his cultivation was limited and his strength was limited. Once, after his wife and child were accidentally killed, Li Qiuxing gave up on killing them and began to plan for revenge. He wanted to exterminate the entire family of his enemy, just like how he would kill the pigs he usually killed. An accident allowed Li Qiuxing to obtain an inheritance that focused on killing. From then on, he was out of control. He, who was originally quite talented, advanced by leaps and bounds. However, his temperament also changed. He kept killing and earned himself the name of Butcher. Because he had killed too many people, some people could not be killed. It was not that they could not be killed, but that some people were not willing to let their loved ones be killed, so they issued a bounty. Therefore, Butcher was included in the mission of every sect in the Taiyuan continent. It was not unique to the Taiyuan Sky sect. It's a disciple of the Scorching Sword sect. After a while, someone approached the corpse and saw the symbol on the sleeve of the white robe. His face suddenly changed. What? It's actually a disciple of the Scorching Sword sect? Yes, and it seems like he's a core disciple of the Scorching Sword sect. I recognize him. Someone carefully looked at the face of the white-robed youth, and then his face changed again. He exclaimed, "He's the second core disciple of the Scorching Sword sect." It said that his strength is stronger than most of the peak 9-star experts. The Scorching Sword sect was one of the top sects in the Taiyuan continent. Although it could not be compared to a top sect like the Taiyuan Sky sect, it was still one of the few powerful sects under the Taiyuan Sky sect. The second core disciple was shocking. Light footsteps slowly came from afar. It had a certain rhythm, like the beat of a drum, and instantly attracted everyone's attention. Love, go little say, W. Chu. Everyone looked over and saw a figure that seemed to be walking over step by step from nothingness. His face was calm, and his clear eyes were like the morning stars, but also as deep as the sea. He wore a dark blue, close-fitting robe that seemed to be flowing like water. He was extremely agile, and there were 2 swords at his waist. His steps were light, and he seemed to be riding the wind. Suddenly, the burly man who had been eating and drinking stopped. He turned his head and looked over. On his rough face, there was a ferocious look in his eyes. This was a feeling. This person was coming for him, and he was a great threat to him. Wiping the wine from the corner of his mouth, Butcher Li Qiuxing grabbed the big butcher knife on the table. His tall and strong body was like a big black bear. He strode over to Qinzong. The eyes of the people in the restaurant followed and finally fell on Qinzong. Another one who's here to kill the butcher. I hope he can kill the butcher. It'll be difficult. The butcher Li Qiuxing had the strength of the first polarity, and he had killed a first polarity expert. Dong dong dong. It was as if war drums were beating. That was the butcher's footsteps. Clear footprints were left on the wide street, and the street was shaking. The butcher ran at an astonishing speed. He was like a meteorite carrying an astonishing aura as he rushed toward the young man in the dark blue robe. He was Qinzong. The huge butcher knife was aimed at Qinzong, and Qinzong immediately felt like he was being locked on. It was as if no matter how he moved, he could not avoid the knife. Although the butcher knife was huge, the tip of the knife was extremely sharp, as if it could pierce the sky. As the butcher charged at high speed, the tip of the knife and the edge of the knife tore the air apart, leaving a scarlet mark. It was as if a red aurora had shot over, but it was as majestic as the impact of a tsunami. This knife seemed very simple, but made Qinzong's eyes light up slightly. This was because this was a knife that had been tempered thousands of times. It was a knife that reduced complexity to simplicity and returned to simplicity. There was nothing fancy about it. It only pursued the pure pursuit of killing. It killed for the sake of killing. The extreme simplicity allowed Qinzong to see another pinnacle of skill. When the gigantic butcher's knife neared, Qinzong felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if this knife could slice his body open in an instant, separating his flesh and bones without any damage. It was a very strange feeling. This pinnacle of skill and strange feeling made Qinzong make a decision. The heavenly sun sword was unsheathed, and a scarlet sword beam flashed across the sky. In less than 1/100th of a second, the heavenly sun sword and the huge butcher knife had crossed more than 100 times. The butcher knife was huge, weighing more than 500 kilograms. However, in the butcher's hand, it was as light as a feather. It was extremely flexible, as if it was an extension of his arm. After more than 100 changes, each strike made Qinzong's hair stand on end. It was as if the knife could separate his flesh, blood, bones, and tendons. However, the 100 strikes were all blocked by Chunzong's sword. They were unable to harm Chunzong at all. He blocked it. Everyone's eyes widened, and their hearts beat wildly. The previous few people could not block the butcher's knife and were instantly killed. Only this young man in a dark blue robe did it, and it looked as if he did it effortlessly. Perhaps there was hope to deal with this ferocious and terrifying butcher. The butcher, Li Qiuxing, had a ferocious expression. The murderous intent in his eyes was so dense that it was almost tangible. The huge butcher knife struck again, and the scarlet sword beam covered the surroundings. In an instant, hundreds of strikes were even more ferocious and ruthless. However, Chunzong swung his sword and blocked all the sword beams with ease. Blood Butcher. A thunderous roar reverberated through the air, causing the surrounding air to vibrate violently. The tiles on the roof of the house shattered, and a violent gale rose from all directions. The bloody light spread and dyed the butcher knife red. It soared into the sky. The butcher's back was also dyed red by the bloody light. There seemed to be a faint stench coming from it, accompanied by sinister screams that sent chills down one's spine. As the blood-red blade light approached, Chunzong felt that his pure blood and chi seemed to be stirred up by it. Spirit Butcher. He roared again, and the bloody light behind him turned dark red, almost black. The aura became even more sinister and evil. There were faint cries and roars of ghosts, which made people tremble in fear. The black and red sword beams splashed, covering half the sky and swallowing everything. Heaven and Earth Butcher. The third strike was brazenly struck. This was the most powerful strike. The completely black light expanded and covered half the sky. The black sword beam was so huge that it seemed to split the sky and earth in front of it. Chunzong was too much of a threat to the butcher. The Blood Butcher, the Spirit Butcher, and the Heaven and Earth Butcher were the three major killing moves that he had inherited. Usually, the butcher would only use one move, but this time, he used all three. The power of these three moves was unparalleled, and Chunzong's expression turned slightly serious. In that case, let's try the new Songyu. Chunzong thought to himself. 5 lesser true intents were instantly injected into the Heavenly Sun Sword, and the Void Sword Force followed suit. The long sword trembled slightly, emitting earth-shattering buzzing sounds. A jade-white color spread from the tip of the sword, and an astonishingly high temperature was emitted from the sword, turning the surroundings into a furnace. The air was scorching hot, and the ground was scorched black. Songyu's edge. With a serious expression, Chunzong looked forward and swung his sword. The seemingly light sword did not carry much power, but displayed an unparalleled sharpness. Cut, cut, cut. Whether it was the blood-red sword beam, the dark red light, or the last black sword beam that could slaughter the world, none of them could withstand the jade-white sword beam. It was like a hot knife through butter, pressing forward courageously. Nothing could stop it. The butcher realized that he could not move at all. He could only watch as his 3 major killing moves were completely destroyed. The jade-white sword beam carried endless sharpness as it attacked. Chapter 672. Genius 1 Second. Remember, love, divided by little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. After chopping off Butcher's head with one strike and taking his mustard seed pouch, Chunzong turned around and strode away with swift and light steps under everyone's shocked gazes. He was like a graceful swan. Love go little say W. Chu, who was he? At the foot of Xianming Mountain. More than a dozen corpses were lying on the ground, each of them facing the sky. Their pale faces were distorted, and their eyes were filled with horror and despair. The wounds on each of the corpses were the same. There was a hole in their chests, and their hearts had been dug out. A dark blue flowing light came from afar and landed beside the corpses. It was Chunzong. After taking a closer look at the corpses, Chunzong looked around and moved forward again like a wisp of blue smoke. On a small path in the forest, a dark-skinned short and fat man was chewing on a steaming hot heart that was still beating while walking happily. It doesn't taste as good as last time. You're too weak. The short and fat man said with disdain as he chewed on the heart. Hard-eating guest. The voice came like a gust of wind and entered the short and fat man's ears. The short and fat man immediately turned around and looked. His small eyes shone with a ferocious light that could frighten ordinary warriors with just one look. The moment he saw Chenzong, heart-eating guest's ferocious small eyes suddenly shone with surprise. He threw away the heart in his hand without hesitation and opened his big mouth to reveal his sharp teeth, regardless of the blood and foam at the corner of his mouth. I can feel the exuberant chi and blood in your body. The heart nourished by it must be very delicious. The heart-eating customer licked his sharp teeth with his scarlet tongue. His small eyes narrowed as they emitted a greedy glow. Immediately, his short and fat body flashed, and he charged forward with incomparable agility. In an instant, he appeared in front of Chenzong. He stretched out his right hand and spread his 5 fingers. His fingernails were as sharp as black metal. Even though he was a distance away, Chenzong felt like he was being pierced through. As Heart Eater's sharp claws pierced through the air, Chenzong's heart trembled uncontrollably, as if it was being restrained by an invisible and mysterious force. However, Chenzong ignored the sharp claws that were about to drill into his heart. He instantly turned around and unsheathed his sword. The crimson sword light was like the sun in the sky, illuminating this part of the world. A sharp metallic sound rang out as countless sparks flew out. The powerful recoil caused a figure to quickly retreat. Loved go little, say, it turned out that the one rushing at Chenzong to grab his heart was just a shadow. The real one had already appeared behind Chenzong and attacked him, but Chenzong sensed it and caught it. He blocked it with his sword and repelled it. You have some skills. Heart Eater's laughter became sharper and faster. It was like a cloud of smoke that dissipated and condensed. It was hard to tell if it was real or fake. The strange and sharp laughter came from all directions. It was like a demonic sound that pierced through one's brain. Chenzong's expression did not change at all. With a sword in hand, all the attacks from all directions were blocked. Heart Eater unleashed his strongest move. The moment he swung his claw, Chenzong's heart skipped a beat uncontrollably. Then, it stopped as if he was being suppressed by an invisible mountain. His chi and blood stopped flowing as well. His body felt weak all of a sudden and felt extremely uncomfortable. Then, he felt as if he was being tightly grasped by an invisible hand. It contracted abruptly and moved forward as if it was about to leave his chest and body. Even his strength was about to be drained. Chenzong could see the hideous smile on Heart Eater's ugly face. The sword light flashed, dazzling and piercing through the sky. In the end, there was a touch of jade white that remained in Heart Eater's eyes. That was the last thing he saw. Decapitation with a sword. Heart Eater's move was indeed amazing. If it was a martial artist with the strength of the first level, it would be very difficult for him to resist it. He would most likely be killed, unless he was an expert like Yu Zhengxiao. However, even if Yu Zhengxiao was here, he would not feel good facing this move. Chenzong's strength had already reached the 2nd level and was even at the stronger level. Although he was somewhat affected, he could still get rid of the counterattack. Chenzong would have killed Heart Eater with a sword if he did not want to see his opponent's moves. After taking the head and the mustard seed bag, Chenzong left. It was raining heavily at night. A thumb-sized candle flame was lit in the rundown temple. The flame flickered and could only illuminate a small area. The pitter-patter sound came from all directions. It was the sound of raindrops hitting the leaves, tiles, stones, and earth. It was very complicated, but it was like a rhythm that played in the night. Love go little, say, W. Chue figure sat beside the candlelight. Under the illumination of the candlelight was a face full of vicissitudes. The slightly stooped figure swayed along with the flickering candlelight, appearing even more lonely under the dense sound of the rain. A long knife that was as bright as the crescent moon was placed on his leg. He was gently wiping it with a piece of blood-red cloth over and over again, as if he was maintaining the most exquisite work of art. "Are you also here to kill me?" Suddenly, the middle-aged man raised his head and looked at the entrance of the rundown temple with his turbid eyes. His voice was slightly hoarse, like that of a night owl. "Yes." At the same time, a figure walked into the rundown temple from outside. Even though it was raining heavily outside, Chenzong's body was not wet at all. You are the third person who came to kill me today. The middle-aged man's turbid eyes fell on the machete on his leg again. He wiped it carefully and said something that seemed to have nothing to do with him. After tonight, there will be no more. Shinzong responded simply. You are very confident. At the same time, a pale knife light tore the light of the candle flame. In an instant, it was in front of Shinzong, making Shinzong feel that he was going to be cut in half. The red sword light was like the sun, illuminating the whole run-down temple. The pale knife light was shattered. Chaotic 9 movements of the dismembered body. Using his unique skill, a pale knife light broke through the air again. The moment it approached, it suddenly trembled and turned into 9 rays that surrounded Shinzong. Each ray of pale knife light was like a machete, fiercely attacking Shinzong with amazing sharpness. Without a specific trajectory, it was difficult to find any pattern. It was pure chaos, but its power was amazing. It was a very delicate move. This kind of knife technique was enough to kill most of the grandmasters with the strength of the first level, but it was far from enough for Shinzong. With a swing of the sword, the 9 pale knife lights were all shattered. The expression of the dismembered knife suddenly changed. Without hesitation, it turned into a pale light and rushed to a corner of the rundown temple. The attacker was too strong. Knowing that he was no match for him, he decided to escape. But would Shinzong let him go? Sharpness of blue jade. The earthine sword was unsheathed. A jade-white sword light pierced straight out. It was extremely fine, extremely sharp, and could cut through anything. The jade-white sword light disappeared. The dismembered knife suddenly stopped and fell in a corner of the rundown temple. After cutting off the head and taking the mustard seed bag, Shinzong was about to walk out of the rundown temple when a figure suddenly rushed in. As his eyes opened and closed, they lit up the entire dilapidated temple. His gaze quickly swept past Shinzong's headless corpse in the corner. Did you kill the dismembered knife? Give me his head. The first 2 sentences were shockingly domineering, as if Shinzong would die if he didn't obey. As he spoke, he directly grabbed the mustard seed bag at Shinzong's waist, intending to take it away. Shinzong's silhouette flashed as he evaded the other party's grasp. He noticed the other party's attire, a dark blue robe. This was the symbol of a core disciple of the Tai Yuan Sky sect. He glanced at his cuff and found that it was the symbol of Mount Jin Yuan. This man was a core disciple of Mount Jin Yuan. Since we are both disciples of the Sky sect, I won't argue with you. Give me the head of the dismembered knife. The core disciple was a little surprised that Shinzong dodged. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, If you have the ability, come and take it. Shinzong's answer was more direct. You're asking for trouble. The core disciple of Mount Jin Yuan was angry. His majestic momentum was like an invisible mountain. Then he raised his arm and slashed at Shinzong with his palm like a knife. His momentum was extremely terrifying. Shinzong pointed his finger like a sword. It was amazingly sharp. It sounded like a knife and sword colliding. Shinzong's body didn't move, but the core disciple swayed and took 3 steps back. Well, Li Yuan, will remember what happened today. Li Yuan snorted. He didn't pull out his knife again, but quickly left the rundown temple. Shinzong didn't chase after him. First of all, there was a rule in the Tai Yuan Sky sect that official disciples of the Tai Yuan Sky sect were not allowed to kill each other outside. Second of all, the core disciple didn't have any killing intent. He just wanted to snatch the merit points. Li Yuan. Shinzong pondered for a moment and knew the identity of the core disciple of Mount Jin Yuan. He had the strength of the first level and was not inferior to Yu Zhongxiao. It seemed that Mount Jin Yuan was worthy of being called the first mountain of the Tai Yuan 7 mountains. Taking a step forward, Shinzong walked out of the dilapidated temple and stepped into the darkness of the night. The heavy rain continued to fall from the gloomy skies, unceasingly smashing onto Shinzong's body. However, it was blocked by a formless energy. With the 3 heads that symbolized the mission, Shinzong quickly returned to the Wanji Hall of the Tai Yuan Sky sect to turn in the mission. 3,000 merit points were obtained. He checked the mission list again and found no suitable mission, so he could only give up for the time being. After all, some missions had low merit points and required a lot of time. The loss outweighed the gain. Some missions had high rewards but required a lot of time and energy, so it wasn't suitable for short-term gains. After returning to the high cliff pavilion of the Green Feather Mountain, Chunzong took out the weapons of Heart-Eating Guest, Corpse-Splitting Blade, and the other two. All of them were third-grade pseudo-spiritual weapons. On the Chaotian Island, a third-grade pseudo-spiritual weapon was very valuable. However, on the Blue Waves continent, third-grade pseudo-spiritual weapons were very common. Next, he checked the mustard seed bags of the three. There were a lot of substandard spirit sources, more than 2,000 in total. In addition, there were many medicinal pills, pseudo-spiritual herbs, ores, and so on. Finally, there were the martial arts of the three. Slaughter Method, Heart-Devouring Claw, Corpse-Separating Blade. Chunzong had fought with the three and personally experienced their martial arts and skills. He was very clear about the power of these three martial arts. Therefore, he planned to comprehend them and see if they were beneficial to him. First, he looked at the slaughter method. This inheritance was quite evil. It was a cultivation method that focused on killing. It was a combination of cultivation method and martial arts. Once one cultivated this slaughter method, they would be affected and become bloodthirsty. The more they killed, the stronger they would become. Looking at it, Chunzong couldn't help but frown. This was obviously not to his liking. His cultivation method had always been under his own control. He didn't want to be disturbed and lose himself. Chapter 673. Chunzong did not like most of the slaughtering techniques that Butcher cultivated. However, Chunzong was amazed by the simplicity of the slaughtering techniques. He was able to comprehend and absorb the advantages of the techniques for his own use. The Heart-Devouring Claw was a pure martial art, but it was equally evil. It required the user to dig out the opponent's heart. Moreover, the cultivation process also required the use of the heart, especially the human heart. Chunzong's expression was calm as he slowly read on, comprehending the mysteries within. Once the Heart-Devouring Claw was mastered and executed, no matter who it was, they would feel as if their heart was being grabbed and dug out. Chunzong had personally experienced this feeling before. One must know that Heart-Eater's strength was only at the first level, while Chunzong was at the second level. The difference was obvious, but the Heart-Devouring Claw was able to make Chunzong feel as if his heart was being dug out. It was easy to imagine how evil and mysterious this martial art was. However, Chunzong did not have any clue at the moment. Looking at the Corpse-Splitting Blade, this was another evil martial art. It required the user to use corpses to continuously split them in half, especially human corpses. After mastering it, every strike would carry the aura of death, giving the user the feeling that they would be cut in half. The slaughtering techniques pursue the ultimate killing techniques, while the Heart-Devouring Claw and the Corpse-Splitting Blade's mysteries contain attacks on the spiritual level. Chunzong said to himself. The feeling of having one's heart being dug out, the feeling of being cut in half, actually originated from one's spiritual consciousness, from one's soul. It was a feeling, a hint from one's soul. With 3,000 merit points, Chunzong entered the martial arts demonstration realm once again, comprehending Songyu. Now, Chunzong had evolved Songyu's edge and Songyu's sharpness based on the original Songyu's foundation and the new Heavenly Sun Sword and Earthly Yin Sword. However, Chunzong felt that there should be and could be 5 moves. 5 moves, 5 transformations, displaying the true intent of Sword and 5 minor true intents to their fullest potential. After comprehending and evolving the edge of Dark Jade and the sharpness of Dark Jade, it was easier for Chunzong to find a balance. Therefore, he evolved the remaining 3 moves one by one. He also comprehended the peak slaughter technique and tried to integrate it into his swordsmanship. After leaving the martial arts stage, Chunzong sent a message to his master, the Lord of the Blue Feather Mountain. Then, he went to the Molten Fire Hall to look for Elder Hua. Elder Hua had a great reputation, and not just anyone had the right to request for him to forge a weapon. However, Chunzong was the disciple of the Lord of the Blue Feather Mountain. With the Lord of the Blue Feather Mountain personally asking for him, Elder Hua did not dare to reject him. Take out all the materials then. Elderwood chuckled. Qinzong took out a large amount of materials. They were all spoils of war and piled up on the ground. Elderwood swept his gaze across. It's just these pieces of trash. Forget it. You can head back first. Come back 3 days later to collect the sword. Elder Hu waved his hand and chased Qinzong away once more. Qinzong could not help but be speechless. He had not even made his request. Forget it. He could only wait for 3 days to see the results. 3 days was actually a short period of time. It would be over very quickly if he were to cultivate his cultivation technique and practice his sword skills. Qinzong came to the Molten Fire Hall once again. The swords are over there. Elder Hua was standing in front of the huge furnace. Without turning his head, he said directly. Qinzong walked towards the sword rack. There were only 3 swords on it. Immediately, Qinzong's gaze was attracted to them. The 3 swords were crimson red in color. They were the same as the 2 swords from before. However, their appearances were different. Qinzong took out the first sword. It felt heavy in his hand. It was a heavy sword. It was estimated to weigh more than 10,000 pounds. It was extremely shocking. The palm-wide sword blade was as thick as 2 fingers. Its length was more than a meter. Its hilt was also longer than an ordinary sword and was suitable for holding with 2 hands. The tip of the sword was oval-shaped and was not suitable for stabbing. The blade did not seem to be sharpened either. This was a sword that relied purely on its weight and strength. As Qinzong swung the sword, he felt that every swing of the sword was accompanied by a terrifying roar. It was as if the wind was howling. Every swing of the sword carried an extremely terrifying power. That was the explosive power produced by the weight of the sword and Qinzong's immense strength under the high-speed swing. It was as if it could split mountains. The heavy sword had no edge. It used strength to suppress others. This sword was suitable for the sword intent. Qinzong was instantly overjoyed. He was filled with anticipation for the remaining 2 swords. Putting the heavy sword back on the rack, Qinzong took out the second sword. It was completely different from the heavy sword. It was even the complete opposite. It was a thin sword. The blade was only as thick as a pinky finger. It was very thin and covered with special patterns. It was so light that it seemed to be weightless. Qinzong tried to swing it. He realized that it was effortless. The speed of the sword was astonishing. It was faster than usual. The patterns on the blade were used to reduce air resistance, allowing the sword to be faster regardless of whether it was swinging or stabbing. This sword was most suitable for the sword intent of speed. He pulled out the third sword. It looked very ordinary. Compared to the other 4 swords, there was nothing outstanding about it. But for some reason, it gave Qinzong a very strange feeling. It was as if it contained a kind of momentum, a unique momentum. Could this sword be most suitable for the sword intent of force? Qinzong couldn't help but think to himself. He tried swinging the sword, but there was nothing special about it. However, when Qinzong activated the true meaning of the sword lightly trembled and emitted a very weak sword hum, but it had the power of thunder. Soon after, Qinzong felt the air around the sword become incomparably viscous, like mercury. As the sword swung, there was a majestic aura being pulled along. When the sword swung down, Qinzong felt as if the sword was pulling apart the world. It was as if what he swung was not a sword, but a space. Force. Thank you, Elder Hua. Qinzong bowed deeply. These 3 swords were really very suitable for his heart. Elder Hua did not care about Qinzong. Qinzong did not care either. Elder Hua had such a temper. Satisfied with the new 3 swords, Qinzong walked out of the Molten Fire Palace. He felt that his footsteps were very light, as if he was going to fly with the wind. People were in high spirits. Outside the towering cliff pavilion in the endless sea of clouds. Taking a deep breath, Qinzong held the hilt of the heavy sword with both hands. His tyrannical physical strength exploded. His arm swelled up as he swung the heavy sword. With the true meaning of sword force as the main point and the other 4 lesser true meanings as support, along with the void sword force, he suddenly slashed out with his sword. The power of blue jade. The palm-sized jade white sword light carried an extremely shocking power. It was as if the weight of a mountain was compressed within it. It was like a meteor striking down. The void shook and the sea of clouds churned. The sword cut down thousands of meters, shattering everything. The heavy sword had no edge, but its power was unparalleled. Returning the heavy sword to its scabbard, Chunzong looked at the thick jade, white sword light that had cut through thousands of meters and exhaled heavily. Indeed, with this heavy sword, the power of blue jade could be unleashed to its fullest potential. Following that, Chunzong pulled out the light sword. With the sword intent as the main force, he swung the sword. It was light, but as fast as the aurora. It was so fast that even Chunzong was surprised. There was no stance, as if it had never moved. Only the jade white sword light pierced through the air. The speed of blue jade. The last sword was called the power of blue jade. This sword was different from the other four swords. It was even more mysterious. With the sword out of its scabbard, Chunzong felt that the sword had become extremely heavy. It was as if it was dragging the world behind it. Vaguely, he could see a patch of darkness pressing forward with the sword. Shocking power. Boom. It was as if there were thousands of thunderbolts exploding, but there was no lightning. The sea of clouds was crushed under the impact of the sword, turning into nothingness. So strong. Chunzong couldn't help but gasp. These were 5 unique skills based on Song Yu's one move. The edge of blue jade, the sharpness of blue jade, the power of blue jade, the speed of blue jade, the power of blue jade. Every move was very powerful, and each had its own merits. However, in terms of difficulty and mystery, the power of blue jade was the most profound. With these 5 moves, I have even more ways to fight my enemies. Chunzong couldn't help but smile. However, after the evolution of the blue jade, it consumed more energy every time it was used. If it were a normal late-stage 9-star, they would probably only be able to use a few moves. However, even if it were him, he could only use a dozen moves in a row. However, these sword moves were very powerful. There was no need to use them in a normal battle. Being able to use a dozen moves in a row was enough. In addition to the 5 swords of blue jade, the other minor sword intents can also be activated with the corresponding sword. They will be even more powerful. It's the same for moves created from the 5 minor sword intents. In short, these 5 swords were not only created for the 5 swords of blue jade, but they could also be used for other sword moves. Sharpness, strength, speed, and force. They cover the characteristics of the sword and the 5 fundamentals of sword arts. If that's the case, these 5 swords should be given a suitable name. Chunzong couldn't help thinking. The sword moves were ever-changing, densely packed like the stars in the sky, but they would never stray away from those 5 points. That was the most fundamental thing. If that's the case, these 5 swords shall be called the 5 swords of Huanjin. Chunzong finally made the decision. It's true, it's true, it's true, it's true. When the name was decided, Chunzong suddenly felt refreshed and his mind was clear. It was as if the clouds had parted to reveal the moon. At this point, the sword moves have come to an end. The rest is to raise my cultivation to the peak of the 9-star level and try my best to comprehend the true sword force. I need to comprehend more minor sword intents and reach the limit of what I can achieve. Chunzong was confident that he could reach the peak of the 9-star level before the sect tournament. As for the sword force, it was too difficult and he wasn't confident. Comprehending minor sword intents wasn't easy either, unless he could enter the Enlightenment realm. However, entering the Enlightenment realm required at least 1,000 merits. Chunzong wanted to enter the 3rd realm, which required 3,000 merits. He could only do missions to earn more merits. With a thought, Chunzong took the 5 swords of Huanjin and headed to the Huanji Hall. The Huanjin Speed Sword and Huanjin Sharpness Sword were on his waist, while the Huanjin Sharp Sword, Huanjin Strength Sword, and Huanjin Strength Sword were on his back. The longest, broadest, and heaviest Huanjin Strength Sword was in the middle. The reason why they were arranged this way was to make it easier for him to use the swords. He could unleash the greatest power in an instant. Stepping into the Huanji Hall, Chunzong went straight to the mission list and checked it carefully. The first thing he looked at was the solo missions. Unfortunately, there weren't any suitable solo missions. Chunzong could only look at other missions, such as group missions. Chapter 674. Whoosh, whoosh. A few wind-breaking sounds rang out at the same time, and a few figures flew out of the Super Yuan Mountain as fast as lightning. Every single one of them was at least at the peak of the 9-star level. Their speed was extremely fast as they quickly left the Taiyuan Mountain and headed towards the Hongyuan Mountain. In the Taiyuan continent, there were many mountains. The Taiyuan Mountain was the first, and the Hongyuan Mountain was the second. However, the primordial mountain was rich in heaven and earth spirit chi. It was a rare cultivation place, especially the primordial 7 mountains. Because of the terrain and people, it was eventually taken over by the primordial heavenly sect and became the location of the sect. On the other hand, the Taiyuan heaven sect was extremely tyrannical. They directly treated the Super Yuan Mountain as their territory. Other forces were not allowed to set up their sect, not even an ordinary encampment. In terms of land area, Hongyuan Mountain was ranked second in the Taiyuan continent. However, in terms of cultivation environment, it was ranked last. It was said that 1,000 years ago, Hongyuan Mountain was not only the second largest, but also the second largest cultivation environment. It was occupied by a famous large sect at that time and became the location of the sect. That sect flourished for a time and was only slightly inferior to the Taiyuan heavenly sect. However, after a great battle, the sect fell apart and was directly destroyed. The Great Origin Mountain was also destroyed, and a large amount of heaven and earth spirit chi was lost, turning into a place lacking in spirit chi. As time passed, the cultivation environment of the Hongyuan Mountain became worse and worse. Even the demonic beasts were unwilling to stay here and migrated in large numbers, not to mention the martial artists. In the end, they were abandoned. However, in the past few years, someone had accidentally discovered the Blood Spirit Essence Stone in Hongyuan Mountain. The Blood Spirit Essence Stone was a special treasure born from the boundless blood chi. It could strengthen one's blood chi, assist in the cultivation of some cultivation methods, refine pills, and even be used to refine weapons. In short, the Blood Spirit Essence Stone had many uses, but its production was low, which led to its high price. This time, because there were people who needed them, a mission to collect Blood Spirit Essence Stones had been posted on the mission board. According to the grade of the Blood Spirit Essence Stones, the reward was different. A low-grade Blood Spirit Stone was worth 100 merit points, and a mid-grade Blood Spirit Stone was worth 500 merit points. As for a high-grade Blood Spirit Stone, each piece could be exchanged for 3,000 merit points. As for top-grade Blood Spirit Stones, no merit points were given. That was because even high-grade Blood Spirit Stones were extremely rare, let alone top-grade ones. The mission of collecting Blood Spirit Stones wasn't a solo mission, nor was it a group mission. Rather, it was a mission that anyone could accept. Because of the high merit points reward and the time it would take to get back and forth, many people chose to take this mission. Since the reward was proportional to the effort, many people chose this mission. From Super Yuan Mountain to Hongyuan Mountain, with everyone's speed, it took them 2 days to arrive. What a thin spirit chi. It's almost impossible to sense much of it. This is also the reason why Hongyuan Mountain was abandoned. It's hard to imagine how intense the great battle 1,000 years ago was. Chen Zong didn't say anything, but the expression that flashed across his face showed his inner turmoil. It was a wasteland. At first glance, there were only stones and sand. It was difficult to see any trees, let alone grass. This was simply a place where not even a blade of grass grew. If one looked closely at the ground, they would find traces of brown hidden in it. It was like the color of dry blood. The spirit chi here is thin. It's only slightly better than the eastern continent, Chen Zong thought to himself. Such a place was indeed not suitable for building a sect, nor was it suitable for martial artists to cultivate. Without stopping, they went deeper into Hongyuan Mountain. There were many peaks in Hongyuan Mountain. Chen Zong and the others had only set foot on one of them. However, the situation of each peak was similar. It was barren and barren. Half a day later, the group stopped at a remote and hidden peak. Under the guidance of the guide, they found the entrance to an incomparably hidden cave. Brothers, according to our agreement, I'll lead the way here. After that, we'll enter the cave to search for blood spirit stones. Whether or not we can find them will depend on our own abilities. The young guide turned around and cupped his hands with a smile. I'll take my leave first. After saying that, the young man didn't have any intention of entering the cave. Instead, he left. He was only responsible for leading the way. Of course, he didn't lead the way for free. Instead, he was given 100 merit points as a guide fee. A guide fee of 100 merit points was naturally not low. In fact, it could be considered expensive. However, the young man promised that he knew of a cave that produced blood spirit stones. As long as their luck wasn't too bad, they would at least gain a few pieces. However, they were all core disciples of the Tai Yuan Heaven sect. If they deliberately deceived them, the consequences were not something they could bear. Unless they didn't want to live, they wouldn't deliberately deceive others. Let's go. As soon as one of them finished speaking, he turned into a stream of light and rushed into the cave. The second and third person, Chun Zong, also stepped into the cave. In the blink of an eye, all 5 of them had entered the cave. About 10 breaths later, a figure suddenly flew over from a distance. Standing at the entrance of the cave, he looked inside. It was the person who had led Chun Zong's group of 5. A look of pity appeared on his face. He clenched his teeth and felt tormented inside. Immediately after, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, all the pity was replaced by ruthlessness. Don't blame me. I didn't want to do this, but for my survival and my future, I can only ask you to die. After saying that, the young man turned and strode away. This time, he really left because he was sure that the 5 people who had entered would not be able to come out alive. The cave was very dry. As they went deeper, the temperature gradually rose. Vaguely, everyone felt that their blood and qi flowed faster than usual. This feeling was most obvious to Qinzong. First, his perception was better than the others. Second, his blood and qi were stronger and purer. From this point, it could be generally said that there was something related to blood and qi inside. Perhaps it was the so-called blood spirit stones. The 5 people were extremely fast, and their footsteps were very light. It was almost impossible to hear their footsteps. As they walked, 6 forks appeared in front of them. The 5 people couldn't help but stop. In my opinion, why don't we split up? This way we can find the blood spirit stones and avoid unnecessary conflicts, one of them said immediately. This was a good idea. After all, everyone was looking for the blood spirit stones and didn't want to have unnecessary conflicts. Of course, if there was no other choice, they would still fight. There were 6 forks, enough for 5 people to take 1 each, and there would still be leftovers. Qinzong chose a fork at random. The deeper he went, the drier it became. The restlessness of his blood and qi became more obvious. The moment he walked out of the fork, a red light flashed in front of Qinzong's eyes. It was like an illusion. This was the corner of a fork. It was connected to 2 other forks. He didn't know where it led. Qinzong didn't think too much at this time because his eyes were attracted by a red light on the cave wall. He reached out and grabbed at the wall. Before his 5 fingers could touch it, the wall was torn open and he grabbed something shining with a red light. It was a blood-red stone about the size of a duck's egg. The moment the blood-red stone entered his hand, Qinzong clearly felt his blood and qi become more restless. It was as if the stone in his hand had a great attraction to his blood and qi. Blood spirit stone. Yes, this was a very valuable blood spirit stone. However, Qinzong carefully examined it and found that there was only a circle of dark red lines on the stone, indicating that it was only a low-rank blood spirit stone worth 100 merit points. With a flip of his hand, the blood spirit stone was stored in his virtual ring. He looked at the 2 forks and chose to go forward. There were many forks in this cave. Not long after, Qinzong came to another turn. This time, he didn't find any blood spirit stones. About a few minutes later, Qinzong stepped into a huge cave, and there were no more forks in the road. Wisps of red light flickered on the walls of the cave. They were blood spirit stones. His hands reached out, and his qi was like a sharp blade cutting through tofu. He easily broke through the hard cave wall and took out a total of 5 blood spirit stones. They were all low-rank blood spirit stones worth 500 merit points. After calculating, Chenzong had gained 600 merit points, and this wasn't the limit. The profit was quite good. Going back to the original forks, he chose another one. The cave was like a maze, tangled and complicated. Chenzong constantly chose forks, going back and forth until he reached the end of the path. From time to time, he would find low-rank blood spirit stones. Unknowingly, the number of blood spirit stones he had collected had reached 20, each worth 2,000 merit points. In front of him, a red light flickered. Chenzong narrowed his eyes, and his blood and chi became more and more turbulent. The source was the red light. Taking a deep breath, the heat in the air also entered his body. Chenzong's figure flashed, and he quickly rushed forward. Not long after, he rushed out of the fork. His heart was beating faster than usual, and his pure yang blood and chi flowed more than 50% faster. Chenzong's skin was red and hot, and his whole body seemed to be filled with tyrannical power. This was a huge cave. It covered an area of at least tens of thousands of meters and was nearly 100 meters high. The ceiling of the cave was covered with upside-down dark brown stones. They looked like crisscrossing canines, densely packed, and made people unconsciously feel a chill in their hearts. At the center of the cave, there was the largest sharp stone. The other sharp stones around it leaned towards it as if they were worshipping it. Directly below this huge, sharp stone, there was a blood-red pool. It was dozens of meters wide and calm, like a huge blood-red gem. After Chenzong scanned the area, he stared at the blood pool. He could feel the astonishing blood and chi fluctuations from it. It was the first time in his life that he had seen something that made his heart beat faster and his blood and chi flow faster. It was also the blood pool. If a blood and chi realm martial artist stepped in, they would probably reach the limit of the blood and chi realm in a short time. Who knows? They might even reach the great perfection of blood and chi realm through brute force. Chenzong couldn't help but wonder. He couldn't help but shake his head. The blood and chi fluctuations in the blood pool were too tyrannical. If a blood and chi realm martial artist stepped in, they wouldn't be able to withstand it at all. They would explode and die. Even a true martial realm martial artist wouldn't benefit from it. On the contrary, they might even lose their lives. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.